Chapter 1535. Terrifying coldness permeated the surroundings as strands of white, profound ice chi shot out in all directions. Chanyang Mingyue and Chang Jingyun engaged in an intense battle in the air. Chanyang Mingyue became extremely irritated and depressed after realizing that she might be the snow goddess mentioned by Protector Shui. Chang Jingyun became the target for Chanyang Mingyue to vent her feelings. Chanyang Mingyue unleashed her full strength and engaged in an intense battle with Chang Jingyun in the air. Booms constantly rang out, causing the surroundings to collapse and space to distort violently. If it were not for the fact that they were in the snow goddess domain, which made the space there much tougher, just the shockwaves from their battle would have been enough to destroy the Tianyuan continent. Chang Jingyun was completely covered in blood. Even with her strength at mid-returnance, she was forced to retreat under Chanyang Mingyue's fierce attacks. White crystals would appear on Chang Jingyun from time to time, forcing her to divert a portion of her power to stop the spreading ice as she fended off Chanyang Mingyue's fierce attacks. She had suffered greatly from Chanyang Mingyue's ability before, suffering extremely heavy injuries. Obviously, she needed to be extra cautious of the ice around her. As long as she was not frozen by the ice and turned into an ice statue, Chanyang Mingyue would not be able to use the ability. Just who is this woman? She's actually so powerful. She's clearly only at early returnance, yet she can suppress me, who's at mid-returnance. The coldness is just too powerful as well. Even I need to be careful. Chang Jingyun grumbled inside. Chang Jingyun grumbled inside as well. She glanced past the domain that enveloped a radius of 100,000 kilometers and immediately charged into the sky. She wanted to break out of the domain. Once she was no longer suppressed by the domain, she would be able to unleash 10% of her strength. Coupled with her secret techniques, she was confident that even if she could not defeat Chanyang Mingyue, she would not be forced back like this. Boom! However, when Chang Jingyun was about to charge out of the domain, she seemed to have suddenly slammed into a wall. A muffled sound erupted. She couldn't leave the domain at all. The domain was like a prison. If she didn't break the prison, she couldn't leave at all. Chanyang Mingyue aggressively flew over from below. She radiated with a terrifying coldness as she charged toward Chang Jingyun. Chang Jingyun was stern. She raised her head and glanced at Xiongzhong and Gong Shiming, who were fighting in the sky. She gritted her teeth. Since you don't want me to leave, I'll destroy your domain. With a flip of her hand, Chang Jingyun suddenly took out a whip that was around 1/2 meter long. The whip was forged from an unknown material. It seemed ordinary, but it gave off a pulse that was even more powerful than the ancestral artifacts of the Protector clans, causing the space around the whip to tremble. Soaring dragon! Chang Jingyun shouted and used a secret technique. She waved the whip in her hand, and the 1/2-foot-long whip suddenly grew in the wind. In an instant, it became hundreds of feet long. A dazzling green light shot out and covered the snow-white sky. It emitted a dazzling light. Suddenly, a dragon's roar rang out in the sky. The whip that shone with azure light suddenly turned into an azure dragon that was several hundred meters long. It had 2 horns on its head and a snake-like body. It had no wings on its back and 4 claws on its abdomen. It soared through the air like it was riding a cloud. It charged toward Chanyang Mingyue with a terrifying dragon's might. Chanyang Mingyue and Chang Jingyun fought in the sky. Below them, the experts of the 4 races that had gathered on the Tianyuan continent engaged in an intense battle with the army of the foreign world. This time, Xiao Jin did not protect others like last time. Instead, he faced off against a receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints alone. The receival expert had reached late receival, but Xiao Jin's strength had increased from early receival to mid-receival through a violet cloud peach. Coupled with the fact that he was a metallic spirit, born from the world, he possessed a natural advantage in every aspect. Xiao Jin also possessed the 9 godly arts that Xiaoling had passed on to him. As a result, Xiao Jin was evenly matched with the late Receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints, despite his lack of battle experience. Yang Lai, Feng Xiaotian, and Gui Haidao also faced off against a Receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints. However, the three of them only possessed the battle prowess of a Receival expert because of the saint artifacts in their hands. Their personal strength was still at the peak of the Holy Emperor, so they were forced to retreat by their opponents. If it were not for the fact that they had once been Origin Realm experts and had gone through countless battles of life and death, they probably would not have been able to last until now. Poseidon kept two Receival experts busy all by herself. Although she was still a Receival expert, she had reached the peak of late Receival and was only a step away from returnance. At the same time, Poseidon had lived for over 1,000,000 years. Although she had always existed as a soul, her soul had completely surpassed Receival and reached returnance after being refined for 1,000,000 years. As a result, it was difficult for her to gain the upper hand against two experts of the same level as her. Ada, Aer, Asan, and Asi had already formed a sword formation. They used their peak Holy Emperor strength to trap a Receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints. The space where the sword formation was located darkened. All that could be sensed was a brutal, sharp sword chi. It was impossible to see what was happening inside. Even the senses of a returnance expert's soul were unable to penetrate the formation. The war god of the 100 races, Taita, wielded his golden axe as he fought against a Receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints. Although Taita was only a Receival expert, he was completely capable of fighting a returnance expert. As a matter of fact, regular returnance experts were not his opponent, so the Receival expert was heavily injured by a single swing of Taita's axe. He was blown away as blood spurted from his mouth. His body had almost been cleaved in half. Shock filled his face. Mysteries of war, mortal breaker. Taita growled. He shone with golden light and swung his axe a second time like a god of war. The golden axe swung toward the Receival expert with devastating power. The Receival expert was unable to dodge at all. All he could do was raise his huge sword above his head to block the attack. With a boom, the great sword in the Receival expert's hand was cleaved in half by the golden axe. However, the axe did not slow down at all. It continued down from the top of his head, cleaving his body into two halves with his forehead as the center. His soul was wiped out. This was the first Origin Realm expert to die in this battle. He had been slain by Taita in just 2 moves. The 49 Holy Emperor's myriad artifact formation also sent out a few ancestral artifacts to keep the remaining Origin Realm experts busy. The other ancestral artifacts began to kill the foreign Holy Emperor that constantly poured out of the tunnel under the Holy Emperor's control. The Battle of the Holy Emperor also began at this moment. It was extremely intense, with people dying at all times. The Holy Emperors of the 4 races all gathered into formations to kill the foreign army. The puppets that had been revived by the saint artifacts all took part in the battle as well. They fought at the very front, engaging in an intense slaughter against the foreign Holy Emperors. They felt no pain or fear. They were completely machines. Even if they suffered unimaginable injuries, they would continue to fight as long as they were still standing. Even if their bodies were cut in half, they would raise their weapons and slash at their enemies mercilessly as long as their heads were still intact. As time went on, the puppets instead became an army that struck fear into the hearts of Saint Emperors from the world of Forsaken Saints. This was because no one would fight as recklessly as the puppets on the battlefield, whether it was the Holy Emperor's army from the world of Forsaken Saints or the experts of the 4 races from the Tianyuan continent. Basically, all of them would flee the battlefield as soon as they were heavily injured. Very few of them were willing to risk their lives to fight to the death. However, even with that being the case, many Holy Emperors still died on the battlefield. Kea did not directly take part in the battle. Instead, she ordered the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast to deal with a Receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints. At the same time, she opened the space where the soaring ants were stored. Immediately, a dense swarm of them flew out. There were so many of them that it was impossible to count. They filled every corner of the battlefield. Chapter 1536. Gales whistled through the world, sweeping up the sand and dust on the ground, causing the space to turn gray. The loud rumbles from the battle between the numerous experts rang out incessantly, almost merging into one. Waves of violent energy turned into circles of terrifying storms that collided in all directions, producing muffled rumbles. Although the battle had only been going on for a short while, the battlefield was already littered with corpses. Most of the corpses belonged to the 4 races of the Tianyuan continent. Basically, all of them were saint rulers and holy emperors. On the other hand, the weakest holy emperor from the world of Forsaken Saints was no weaker than the holy emperor from the world of Forsaken Saints. As a result, the number of casualties from the world of Forsaken Saints was less than 1/10 of the casualties from the Tianyuan continent. Even the holy emperor would struggle to take part in such an intense battle, let alone the saint rulers. If it were not for the fact that many of the saint rulers and holy emperor possessed the formations that Feng Xiaotian had passed down to them, allowing them to attack and defend, there would probably be even more casualties. However, the appearance of a large group of soaring ants on the battlefield caused quite a commotion. Miserable cries even rang out in all directions, filled with extreme pain. These were the cries of holy emperors from the world of Forsaken Saints. Their bodies were covered in soaring ants, and their flesh rapidly dissipated as the ants gnawed away at them. Not only did the soaring ants devour their flesh, but even their bones could not escape the fate of being devoured. With a series of bone-chilling noises, the bones were completely devoured by the soaring ants at an unbelievable speed. Not a single bit of them was left behind. Even their souls were not spared. The flesh and blood of the Holy Emperor possessed powerful vitality and flesh. Basically, every time the soaring ants devoured a Holy Emperor, they would pulsate visibly. Their strength would rapidly increase as they devoured the Holy Emperor's flesh and blood. The expressions of the Holy Emperor's army all changed when they saw the terrifying soaring ants. The soaring ants were extremely difficult to kill. The powerful sword Qi and blade Qi they used could even carve a bottomless chasm on the Tianyuan continent, killing hundreds or even thousands of Class 7 magical beasts. However, such powerful attacks were completely useless before the soaring ants. The terrifying sword Qi and blade Qi that could easily kill hundreds or thousands of Class 7 magical beasts could not even kill a single Class 6 soaring ant. The soaring ants completely ignored the attacks, passing through them without any resistance. As a matter of fact, even when they used their powerful energies to create powerful barriers and energy armor, the soaring ants could directly ignore them. They could pass through the barriers and energy armor and injure the Holy Emperor's army. The only method the Holy Emperor from the world of Forsaken Saints had against the soaring ants was to use the sharpness of their weapons to kill them. However, there were just far too many soaring ants. They blotted out the sky and were densely packed together, numbering in the hundreds of millions. It was impossible for them to kill them all if they used this method. At the same time, every time a Holy Emperor died to the soaring ants, their strength would increase drastically. In just a short while, several dozen peak Class 7 soaring ants had successfully advanced to Class 8 after devouring the flesh and blood of the Holy Emperor. However, these soaring ants were very different from magic beasts. As long as magic beasts reached rank 5, they would possess intelligence that was not weak. However, these soaring ants were like the ferocious beasts of the divine realm. Even if they reached rank 9, they would not possess intelligence. They would only have one instinct. However, this instinct could be led by the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast. So no matter how powerful the soaring ants were, they would follow the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast's orders. Kea could also control the soaring ants due to his special relationship with the 7-colored heaven-devouring beast. The number of the Holy Emperor's puppets and the Holy Emperor's puppets rapidly decreased. As the battle continued, the alliance of the four races rapidly weakened. But due to the appearance of the soaring ants, they were still able to match the world of forsaken saints for a moment, even though they were rapidly weakening. However, Holy Emperors constantly appeared in the tunnel. The balance between the Tian-Yuan continent and the world of forsaken saints would be broken very soon. Even with the assistance of the soaring ants, they would not be able to maintain the balance for long. After all, there were just far too many Holy Emperors from the world of forsaken saints. That world had given birth to over 40 Origin Realm experts, and there were even some at Reciprocity. The number of Holy Emperors was something that the people of the Tian-Yuan continent could not imagine. As for the soaring ants, they would not be able to endure the attacks of the Holy Emperors, even if they were at the peak of Class 8, unless Class 9 experts appeared. They could only win through numbers. The soaring ants needed time to devour the flesh and blood of Saint Emperors. During this time, the devoured Saint Emperors would launch a desperate counterattack and kill several hundred or even several thousand, or even over 10,000 soaring ants. As a result, every time the soaring ants devoured a Saint Emperor, they would lose thousands of Saint Emperors or even more. There were even quite a few Holy Emperors who would decisively give up on their bodies when the soaring ants devoured them. Their souls would flee and disappear into the tunnel, so they were not completely dead. At this moment, a soft and pleasant sound of a zither rang out. It was like celestial music with a mysterious power. As soon as it appeared, it suppressed all the other sounds in the field, as if it was the only sound in the world. The zither possessed an irresistible charm. It passed through all obstructions and reached the ears of everyone present. The four armies were not affected by the zither, but when the zither reached the ears of all the Holy Emperors from the world of forsaken saints, it took over their minds in a single instance. Almost at the same time, the eyes of all the Holy Emperors became dazed. They were completely defenseless at that moment. "Quick! Everyone kill them with everything you've got," the Grand Elder roared. The blood-soaked Grand Elder of Mercenary City bellowed out. His presence skyrocketed as he stabbed out with lightning-like speed. By the time the Saint Emperor returned to his senses, the sword had pierced his forehead, wiping out his soul. The other experts of the four races all reacted as well. They struck out with lightning speed, killing the Holy Emperors who had been affected by the zither music as quickly as possible. Just a single wave of attacks dealt a heavy blow to the Holy Emperor's army. Ouyang Yangwen was trapped by the disc. He could only watch on helplessly. Not only had his strength been sealed up, but he could not even move his body. He was as frustrated as he could be. The only good thing was that no one outside could harm him while he was enveloped by the azure light of the disc. A soul attack. It's a soul attack. How is this possible? There's actually an expert who can use soul attacks here. The 9 receival experts from the world of forsaken saints all revealed drastically different expressions as they cried out. Although people who could use soul attacks had appeared in the history of the world of forsaken saints, they were extremely rare. Even across the countless years of history, there were only a handful of them. It had been several tens of thousands of years since someone like that had appeared. Once they did, they would definitely become influential figures because soul attacks were the most difficult to defend against even in the world of forsaken saints. It could even be said that there was no way to defend against them. Furthermore, they were shocked to discover that the person playing the guqin in this world was even more powerful. The sound of the guqin could actually affect them, and this was not because it was specifically targeted at them. If it was, they could not guarantee that they could keep their minds intact. After all, in this battle, there was no room for mistakes. Otherwise, they would be doomed eternally. Chun Jinyan was stern as well. She gazed into the distance at Shangguan Mu, who sat in the air and played her zither. She wanted to stop her, but all she could do was protect herself from Changyang Mingyue's attacks. She did not have the power to deal with Shangguan Mu. Quick, go to the world of forsaken saints and report to the Spirit King. We've underestimated the strength of this world again. We need reinforcements. Get the other 4 elders, Cheng Jingyan called out. Cheng Jingyan yelled. Her voice was transmitted into the tunnel. Many saint emperors in the tunnel heard her clearly. It's Elder Cheng's voice. The expressions of all the holy emperors in the tunnel changed slightly when they heard the voice. Immediately, a few of them turned back as quickly as they could. Chapter 1537. The 7-colored, heaven-devouring beast was no longer a fist-sized beast. Instead, it had become a 10-meter-long soaring ant. It flickered with scarlet, orange, and yellow lights as it fought against a receival expert from the world of forsaken saints. Their battle caused the surroundings to rumble. The receival expert from the world of forsaken saints became more and more shocked as he fought the 7-colored, heaven-devouring beast. He had lived for several tens of thousands of years, so what kind of magical beast had he not seen before? Even if he had not seen one with his own eyes, he had read through countless ancient records in the sacred spirit hall. However, he had never seen such a ferocious beast before. It was actually able to match him, a mid-receival expert, when he was not even a peak saint emperor. Even the ancient records of the sacred spirit hall had not recorded such a powerful magical beast. Furthermore, what shocked him the most was that he had already used all his strength in the battle against the 7-colored, heaven-devouring beast. However, he felt that the 7-colored, heaven-devouring beast still had some strength left. While fighting, its intelligent eyes would occasionally glance at a woman in the distance. The deafening booms in outer space were extremely intense. They were far more intense than on the Tianyuan continent. Violet and azure light blossomed in the darkness where only specks of starlight could be seen, dyeing the entire sky. An extremely sharp streak of light constantly collided with a ball of black light. The figure of a huge hammer constantly conjured, smashing into the air and erupting with devastating might. It shattered the sky and shattered space, causing terrifying cracks several thousand meters long to appear in the violently shaking space. Jianqin and Xiongzhong, Shaoling and Gongximing, the 4 returnance experts, fought in outer space. It was extremely intense, causing space to shatter and the sun and moon to dim. Even the stars in the sky dimmed. In particular, Jianqin and Xiongzhong's battle had reached a white-hot level. A huge white tiger appeared in the empty space. It radiated with a tremendous pressure, as if a beast god had descended. It charged toward Gongximing with an overbearing presence. This white tiger was not a physical entity. Its body was completely condensed from energy, and it looked somewhat illusory. This was the 9 godly arts that Shaoling had used. On the other side, Gongximing's expression was solemn. He could sense a threat from the illusory white tiger. This threat was far stronger than Shaoling's. He didn't dare to be careless. He held the dragon spear in his hand and stabbed at the illusory white tiger. The spear was unbelievably fast. As the spear stabbed out, the space at the tip of the spear shattered like a mirror. Terrifying energy filled the air, and its might was monstrous. With an ice-cold killing intent, it headed straight for the white tiger's head. Although Gongximing seemed extremely old, with his wrinkles all bunched up, making him seem like an old man about to enter the grave, he was still slightly more powerful than Cheng Jingyan. He had basically reached the end of mid-returnance, and was on the verge of breaking through to late returnance. 9 godly arts, heaven and earth seal. At this moment, Xiao Ling extended her hands, and with a low cry, the space around Gongximing froze, trapping him within. Even the spear that he had unleashed came to a halt. He was also frozen in place, unable to move. Although the world-sealing technique seemed similar to the space-freezing technique at sainthood, their power was incomparable. The world-sealing technique was one of the 9 secret techniques of the 9 godly arts. It had been personally passed down by Mo Tianyin in the past. Any single one of the 9 secret techniques was more powerful than a saint tier battle skill. Even Shaoling, who had reached returnance, possessed unfathomable power when using it. It was unlike Saint Tier battle skills, which were completely useless against Origin Realm experts. The moment Gongxi Ming's body froze, the giant white tiger let out an earth-shattering roar and arrived in front of Gongxi Ming. It lifted one of its claws up high and pressed down on Gongxi Ming like a mountain. This claw carried a mysterious and unfathomable power. When the tiger's claw pressed down, the space seemed to be squeezed by a great force and became extremely heavy. Below, Gongxi Ming felt it the most intense. He felt like the claw above him had become a mountain, crushing down with a tremendous might. Not only did it cause his body to become extremely sluggish, but it also caused his body to become sluggish. Moreover, as the tiger claw pressed down, the energy in his body began to stagnate. This stagnation grew stronger as the tiger claw approached, causing Gongxi Ming to wonder if the energy in his body would be sealed when the tiger claw pressed down on him. What a powerful ability! First, it immobilized my body and prevented me from moving. Then, it used this white tiger to suppress me. Fortunately, the person who used this ability is not as powerful as me. Otherwise, I would have suffered a great loss today. Gongxi Ming's muddy eyes suddenly shone brightly. They were as dazzling as 2 torches. Suddenly, a thunderous rumble rang out from Gongxi Ming's body. Countless bolts of lightning suddenly shot out from his body, crackling as they flashed. The light was even more bewitching, like a scorching sun, dyeing the entire world white. Under the rampaging bolts of lightning, the power of the 9 godly arts that trapped Gongxi Ming suddenly collapsed. Gongxi Ming was completely enveloped by a layer of powerful lightning. The tip of his spear turned and stabbed toward the huge claw above him, producing a boom. At the same time, Genshin's azulite swords erupted with extreme power as well, stabbing into Xiongzhong's chest. The 4-foot-long swords had completely pierced Xiongzhong's body, piercing through his chest and back. Only the hilt remained outside. Genshin was heavily injured as well. His left shoulder had been struck by Xiongzhong's hammer. Not only had Genshin's entire left arm been reduced to a bloody mist, but even the left half of his body had begun to crack. It had become a bloody mess. Genshin and Xiongzhong were similar in strength. Coupled with the fact that the 2 of them had used their full strength right from the start, trying to kill each other as quickly as possible, the 2 of them were the most heavily injured. In particular, Xiongzhong's body was reeked with the power of laws from the way of the sword, causing him extremely heavy injuries. He had already injured his core, so he became slightly weak. Genshin constantly vomited blood as his face became sheet white. However, his eyes remained as bright as before. He did not seem weak at all. He used his soul to control the Qing Sua sword and stabbed it toward Xiongzhong's forehead. He wanted to end the battle completely. Is Genshin someone who can't be killed? He's clearly weaker than me, but he's still so lively after taking so many heavy blows from me. Xiongzhong cursed inside. Xiongzhong cursed inside. At this point in the battle, even he could not help but admit that as a mid-returnance expert, he was nowhere near as durable as Genshin. Chapter 1538. If this continues, I'll definitely be defeated. A gleam of light flickered through Xiongzhong's eyes. He could not help but admit that he had underestimated Genshin. In terms of strength, he was definitely more powerful than Genshin, but there was a limit to his strength. It was impossible for him to overwhelm Genshin. However, Genshin's recovery was just too great. With the dual recovery of his strength as a Class 9, Radiant Saint Master and his chaotic body, he could recover in an extremely short amount of time no matter how fatal his wounds were. Even severed limbs could be regrown. Not only did Xiongzhong not possess such great recovery abilities, but the wounds caused by the laws of the sword were unable to heal as well. The more he was injured, the more power he had to use to suppress the power of laws in his wounds, which severely affected his ability to unleash his strength. Compared to Genshin, who basically healed as he fought, Xiongzhong was obviously at a disadvantage. Xiongzhong tilted his head in an attempt to dodge the Qing Suo sword strike that was aimed straight at his forehead. At the same time, he already had thoughts of retreating. If the battle continued like this, it was extremely likely that he would die here. However, at this moment, a gleam of light flashed through Genshin's eyes. He pushed the power of his soul to its limit, using the martial soul force that was created from the fusion of a radiant Saint Master and fighter. Immediately, a tremendous pressure permeated the surroundings. The pressure did not target the body, but the soul. Xiongzhong had never expected Genshin to possess martial soul force that targeted the soul. Xiongzhong's strength as a late returnance cultivator was completely useless against the martial soul force. He was unable to stop the attack at all, so all his defenses were useless. He could only forcefully endure it with his powerful soul. The martial soul force turned into a ripple in the air, fanning out towards Genshin. It moved extremely quickly, and when it swept past Xiongzhong, he immediately trembled gently. At that moment, he felt like his soul had been pierced by a needle. Intense pain filled his head, causing him to become dazed. His eyes blanked out for a moment. Genshin's martial soul force was powerful, known to be able to kill experts of the same level instantly. Even though his soul was as powerful as a returnance expert's, his understanding of martial soul force was still shallow. Coupled with the fact that he had not grasped the secret technique to use martial soul force, he was unable to unleash its true power. As a result, his martial soul force was unable to deal any substantial damage to an origin realm expert. It could only affect them at critical moments. As a result, Xiongzhong recovered from the martial soul force attack in an instant. His soul ached, but he was not injured. However, in that short moment, Xiongzhong had lost the opportunity to dodge Qing Suo's sword. Under the control of Genshin's soul, Qing Suo's sword emitted a resplendent glow as it cut through Xiongzhong's head. Blood immediately splattered into the surroundings with a hint of white. A third of Xiongzhong's head had been cut off. His entire head was dyed red in a single moment, making him seem vicious and terrifying. However, Xiongzhong did not die. The attack had cut off a third of his head, but Xiongzhong had managed to avoid his soul, allowing him to survive. Why, you actually possess a technique that can attack the soul as well. Xiongzhong was shocked as he involuntarily cried out. Genshin's talent had already shocked him, yet he actually possessed a terrifying ability to attack the soul as well. This caused Xiongzhong's heart to churn. Even though the attack was not enough to harm his soul, it was enough to make him lose focus for a split second. Even though it was just a split second, it was enough to turn the tides of the battle. Xiongzhong had already considered retiring. Now that Genshin had revealed his martial soul force, he became utterly frightened. Without any hesitation, he immediately abandoned Genshin and flew toward the tunnel below. Genshin was enveloped by a layer of milky white light. He did not seem to stop healing at all. When he saw Xiongzhong flee, he immediately pursued him. He wanted to kill Xiongzhong as soon as possible. After all, Xiongzhong was a late returnance expert. There were only 2 of them in the entire world of Forsaken Saints. Killing one of them was enough to deal a heavy blow to the world of Forsaken Saints. However, he was rather weak right now. This was the result of using martial soul force. The power of his soul had been severely depleted, and he had even become dizzy. Even though Xiongzhong was heavily injured, he did not slow down at all. He immediately charged back to the Tianyuan continent from outer space and fused with space. He appeared outside the domain of the snow goddess as if he had teleported. He glanced at the azure and violet light that grew closer and closer to him. He gritted his teeth and stopped suppressing the power of laws around his wounds. Instead, he gathered all the power in his body and swung the hammer in his hand, striking the domain of the snow goddess as hard as he could. Boom! With a great boom, the tough domain of the snow goddess loudly shattered from Xiongzhong's full-powered strike. Changyang Mingyue was connected to the domain of the snow goddess. so she suffered a powerful backlash as soon as the domain shattered. She vomited a mouthful of blood. Xiongzhong did not waste any time at all. He also vomited a mouthful of blood before shooting toward the tunnel enveloped by the domain like an arrow. Jianchen pursued him murderously. Just when Xiongzhong was about to enter the tunnel, he suddenly came to a halt. He stared at the tunnel, for figures gradually emerged from the tunnel. They were the other 4 returnants elders from the world of Forsaken Saints. Behind them were over a dozen receival experts. Basically, all the Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints had come. Only a few of them remained in the world of Forsaken Saints. Elder Xiong, why are you in such a horrible condition? When the 4 returnants experts discovered Xiongzhong, who was heavily injured and about to flee back to the world of Forsaken Saints, they were all shocked. After all, Xiongzhong was not like Cheng Jingyan or Gong Ximing. He was a supreme expert, only second to Ouyang Yangwen. When they saw Ouyang Yangwen trapped by the disc, strange expressions immediately appeared on their faces. Was that not the treasure the Spirit King had bestowed upon Kumu? It was used to trap returnants experts from another world. It was a treasure that belonged to their world of Forsaken Saints. So why had it trapped their greatest elder, Ouyang Yangwen? After all, Xiongzhong was not like Cheng Jingyan or Gong Ximing. He was a supreme expert, only second to Ouyang Yangwen. We've underestimated the strength of this world. You have to be careful of the person who has comprehended the way of the sword. I'll heal myself, Xiongzhong snorted coldly. Even though he was in a horrible condition and was heavily injured, he refused to accept this. He found it difficult to accept that he had been defeated by someone who had not even reached the Origin Realm. If that's the case, Elder Xiong, please take Elder Ouyang back and let the Spirit King take the treasure. Leave the matters here to the 4 of us, a returnant's elder said sternly. He looked at Jianchen, who hovered in the air and was surrounded by a layer of milky white light. Jianchen did not continue his pursuit, for more returnants experts had appeared from the world of Forsaken Saints, which made his face become extremely ugly. Not only was he heavily injured, but his soul had also been exhausted after using martial soul force. His battle prowess had plummeted. It would be rather difficult for him to deal with a single mid-returnants expert. So how could the Tianyuan continent stop 4 returnants experts and over a dozen receival experts all of a sudden? He's recovering right now. His rate of recovery is extremely shocking, so we can't give him any time to catch his breath. Xiongzhong gritted his teeth and gritted his teeth. He had not lost to Jianchen in his battle against Jianchen because of the wounds from the laws. Instead, he had lost to Jianchen in terms of recovery. If it were not for the fact that Jianchen's recovery rate was extremely shocking and that he seemed to have endless energy, Xiongzhong was confident that he would have been able to kill him already. With that, 2 of the 4 returnants elders immediately charged toward Jianchen, while the other 2 charged toward Changyang Mingyue and Taita. The remaining receival experts also attacked the people of the 4 races without any hesitation. Xiongzhong's gaze landed on Ouyang Yangwen. After hesitating slightly, he waved his hand and trapped a region of space, disappearing into the tunnel with Ouyang Yangwen and the azure disk. With the addition of the 4 returnants experts and over a dozen receival experts, the balance between the 2 sides was immediately broken. It became a one-sided battle in a single instance, and the 4 races suffered heavy losses in a single clash. Many of their experts died. Changyang Mingyue was still able to maintain the upper hand against Cheng Jingyan, but with the addition of the 2nd returnants expert, the pressure on her immediately increased. She was forced into retreat by the 2 returnants experts. Taita also engaged in an extremely intense battle with one of the returnants experts. Although he barely managed to maintain the upper hand, he was unable to deal with the other returnants experts in a short amount of time. Jianchen was facing the combined attacks of 2 mid-returnants experts. If he was in peak condition, he would have been able to fend them off. But now it was rather difficult for him to keep a single mid-receival expert busy, so it was even more impossible for him to fend off the two of them. He was suppressed as soon as they began fighting, and after a few exchanges, a huge sword struck his waist. He had almost been cleaved in half. The pleasant sound of a zither drifted through the air. It would be rapid and violent at times and gentle at other times. Shangguan Mu sat in the air as she dealt with the dozen or so receival experts behind her. The sound of the zither seemed to possess an irresistible charm. Its influence on the soul was so great that even the receival experts found it difficult to endure it. All of them were affected by it. However, the receival experts would not just sit there and do nothing. Immediately, 5 of them flew out at the same time, charging toward Shangguan Mu, with surging killing intent. The experts from the world of forsaken saints paid special attention to people skilled in soul attacks. 5 of them moved against her in a single moment. A gleam of light flashed through Shangguan Mu's eyes. She played the zither even more hurriedly. The sound of the zither became high-pitched and seemed to possess an ethereal feeling. Wherever the sound waves passed by, the space around them would ripple. With the change in the sound of the zither, a few of the receival experts immediately felt their heads lighten. The influence of the zither on them had completely vanished. However, the expressions of the 5 receival experts who charged toward Shangguan Mu all changed drastically. At that moment, they felt like the charm of the zither had increased by countless times, causing their souls to shake violently. Even their consciousness became blurry. Their figures that charged toward Shangguan Mu all came to a halt because of this. In just a few seconds, the 5 receival experts completely lost their luster. Their eyes became hollow. Afterward, the 5 of them all turned around and began to violently attack their companions. "Xia Ming, what are you doing? Are you trying to betray us?" No. The 5 of them have been controlled by the sound of the zither. The receival experts from the world of forsaken saints all cried out. With no other choice, they could only send 5 receival experts to stop their companions. At the same time, 2 receival experts charged toward Shangguan Mu, with lightning-like speed. They wanted to stop her from playing the zither and save their companions. It was also at this moment that Yang Lai, Feng Xiaotian, and Guihai Yidao fell out of the sky with blood spurting from their mouths. They fell into a sea of corpses and did not climb back up. It was unknown whether they were still alive or not. The 3 of them had not reached the origin realm after all. Even with the help of the saint artifacts, they could only temporarily stall for time. As time went on, they were obviously no longer their opponents. Without the 3 of them keeping the zither busy, the 3 receival experts immediately shifted their targets to the 7 ancestral artifacts controlled by the Holy Emperor. They struck out one after another, knocking the ancestral artifacts to the ground. Most of the 49 Holy Emperor wielding the ancestral artifacts were dead, while the survivors were unimaginably injured. Chapter 1539. Under the attacks of the foreign experts, the experts of the 4 races were immediately forced into retreat. They suffered heavy losses in a short amount of time. In particular, the Holy Emperor and the Holy Emperor's puppets were mercilessly slain by the receival experts from the world of forsaken saints. They had basically been wiped out. There were even receival experts who directly attacked the soaring ants. Although the soaring ants had become much stronger after devouring some of the Holy Emperor's flesh, reaching the 8th class, they could only pose a threat to the Holy Emperor. They immediately lost all their advantages against Origin Realm experts. An Origin Realm expert extended his hand and condensed a 1,000-meter-long hand from Origin energy. He grabbed the countless ants viciously and crushed them to pieces with a single squeeze. The soaring ants had lost all their advantages before an Origin Realm expert. Their innate ability to ignore all energy attacks only seemed to be effective against the Holy Emperor. They were nothing before Origin energy. Even their tough bodies were as fragile as tofu before an Origin Realm expert. Shangguan Mu used her music to control 5 receival experts from the world of forsaken saints. Under her control, The 5 Receival experts all turned to kill their own people, forcing the world of Forsaken Saints to send out another 5 Receival experts to stop the controlled experts. This was because the 5 controlled experts could not be awakened at all. An Origin Realm expert charged over from each side of Shangguan-Mu, or with surging killing intent. They unleashed their full strength as soon as they arrived to stop her from playing the zither. Shangguan-Mu sat in the air as a chilling light shone from her cold eyes. She stared at the zither of the demonic cry on her knees, as if her entire mind had fused with it. She drifted backwards, dodging the attacks of the 2 Receival experts. At that moment, the simple zither of the demonic cry began to produce visible, almost tangible notes as the heavenly enchantress danced her fingers. Every single note possessed terrifying power. Even Receival experts needed to be careful when dealing with them. The notes all charged toward the 2 Receival experts who were attacking her from the left and right. They violently collided, erupting with deafening booms. The expressions of the 2 Receival experts immediately changed. Their gazes toward Shangguan-Mu became filled with shock and sternness. The 2 of them originally thought that Shangguan-Mu had reached her limit after controlling the 5 Receival experts with her zither, but they had never thought that she would still have the energy to deal with the attacks of the 2 Receival experts after controlling the 5 Receival experts. Moreover, just these musical notes were enough to force the 2 Receival experts to use their full strength. They were unable to approach Shangguan-Mu at all. However, what the 2 of them did not know was that when Shangguan-Mu used the powerful notes to stop them, a sliver of clarity and struggle appeared in the empty eyes of the 5 Receival experts. However, it was drowned out by emptiness and blankness again very soon. Shangguan-Mu's way of the zither had already reached an unbelievable level on the Tianyuan continent. In particular, her ability to attack the soul had reached the apex. Any Receival expert who had been controlled by her music had no chance of escaping. However, it was very clear that there was a limit to how many Receival experts Shangguan-Mu could control with her current strength. 5 was her limit, and she could not be disturbed too much, or her control over her music would weaken. Suddenly a boom rang out. The sword formation that Air, a San, and a Sea had created violently shook. A crack had actually appeared in the perfect formation at that moment. With the crack, the blurry figures of the 4 brothers vaguely appeared in the blurry space caused by the formation. Immediately afterwards, a fist-sized ball of light flew out of the crack in the sword formation with lightning speed. A transparent figure could be vaguely seen in the fist-sized ball of light. It flew towards the tunnel nearby in panic. It was an Origin Realm expert from the world of Forsaken Saints. However, only a soul remained. The 4 brothers immediately pursued the fleeing soul of the Origin Realm expert. They surged with killing intent as sword chi surged into the sky. The 4 of them were about to catch up to the soul of the fleeing Origin Realm expert. But at this moment, another Origin Realm expert blocked their path. He stared at them with a sunken face. He replied through the senses of his soul, "I never thought that 4 mere Saint Emperors would be able to injure my old friend to such an extent that he's even lost his body. Probably even the Spirit King back then couldn't achieve such a glorious feat originally. I admired you, but since the 4 of you almost caused my old friend to die here, I can only take your lives and avenge my old friend's body." With that, a halberd appeared in Ma Feng's hand. It radiated with a terrifying presence. As he swung the halberd, it immediately erupted with a powerful light of killing that enveloped the 4 brothers. Form. The 4 brothers were emotionless. They had already prepared themselves for a bloody battle against all the Origin Realm experts in the world of Forsaken Saints this time. With a single command, the 4 brothers immediately formed a formation again with great teamwork. The 4 of them had practiced this formation for a very long time already, so they were extremely familiar with it. Their movements were smooth and fluid, completing the formation in a single stroke. They blocked Ma Feng's attack. A gleam of light flashed through Ma Feng's eyes. His opinion of the four brothers increased slightly once again. He swung his halberd to engage the four brothers in battle. Xiongzhong had destroyed the domain of the snow goddess. Without the domain, the experts from the world of Forsaken Saints had recovered their peak strength. At the same time, the Tianyuan continent was no longer protected by the domain of the snow goddess. Large swathes of land immediately collapsed from the terrifying shockwaves of energy that erupted from the battle. A bottomless chasm of 100,000 kilometers had been reduced to a bottomless chasm. Waves of heat radiated from underground lava. The Tianyuan continent had suffered a crushing defeat. There were just far too many Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints. There were even Origin Realm experts who personally killed sainthood experts, causing extremely heavy casualties to the Tianyuan continent. Other than Shaoling, Taita, and Shangguanmu, who were fighting in outer space, Jianqin, Shaojin, Poseidon, and Chanyang Mingyue were all heavily injured. The three of them faced the combined attacks of more than one Origin Realm expert, while Poseidon faced three of them alone. On the other hand, Jianqin and Chanyang Mingyue both faced two Returnance experts. One of the four Returnance experts who had come as reinforcements did not even take action. Instead, he stared at Jianqin and Taita with interest. Once the four elders who fought against Jianqin and Taita were defeated, he would immediately take action. However, at this moment, the Returnance expert's face changed. He suddenly looked into the distance, and a sliver of surprise appeared on his face. At the same time, the Origin Realm experts who were slaughtering the sainthood experts on the Tianyuan continent all stopped. They all looked into the distance. All of them were looking in the same direction. Chapter 1540. What's that? A Receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints cried out. His face was filled with curiosity and doubt as well as some seriousness. Gradually, similar expressions appeared on the faces of the other Receival experts. This was because, as the blood-red cloud approached, all of them felt a pressure that came from the bottom of their hearts. At the same time, they felt a soul-piercing coldness. The blood-red cloud made the Receival experts from the world of Forsaken Saints feel threatened. Even the Origin Stage practitioner in the sky, who did not participate in the battle, revealed a look of interest at this moment. He stared intently at the rapidly approaching blood cloud as a bright and resplendent divine light shot out from his eyes. It was as if a sharp sword pierced through the blood cloud and allowed him to clearly see the mystery within. At that moment, the blood-red cloud could no longer obstruct the Returnance expert's vision. Under his gaze, an old man in linen robes appeared in the center of the blood-red cloud. He sat in the air as red mist churned around him, forming a boundless blood-red cloud. He rapidly advanced under the cloud. Behind the old man stood a skeleton that was 300 meters tall. It was as large as a hill and stood with the old man in front of it. They formed a stark contrast. The skeleton was completely blood-red, as if it was drenched in blood. It gave off an extremely evil feeling. The tremendous presence that the skeleton gave off had actually reached the Receival realm. Our world of Forsaken Saints severely underestimated the strength of this world. Not only do they have more than one Returnance expert, but they also have far more Receival experts than we expected. Now, 2 more Receival experts have come. The people of this world really are extraordinary. They've actually managed to break through without origin energy, the elder from the world of Forsaken Saints thought. Even though the strength that the Tianyuan continent had displayed was not weak, it was nowhere near enough to the world of Forsaken Saints. Jianqin fought against 2 mid-returnance experts in outer space while covered in blood. His wounds had become even more severe. Even with his Class 9 Radiant Saint Master origin energy and the chaotic body, his recovery was nowhere near as fast as his wounds. If it were not for the fact that he cultivated the chaotic body, he probably would have collapsed long ago. It's Uncle Xiao. I never thought that Uncle Xiao would actually break through. Even though they were in outer space, the blood-red cloud that had appeared on the Tianyuan continent was just far too eye-catching. It attracted Genshin's attention as soon as possible. He immediately recognized the blood-red cloud. It was condensed from soul-devouring force. Houston's appearance had allowed the Tianyuan continent to gain 2 more Origin Realm experts. But Genshin did not celebrate at all. Instead, he sighed helplessly inside. The world of Forsaken Saints was just far too powerful. They had several times more receival experts than the Tianyuan continent. Even with Houston's appearance, he could only stop the Origin Realm experts slightly. The Tianyuan continent still had no chance of victory. Even he was at the end of his rope. Only by using his full strength did he manage to keep the 2 mid-returnants experts busy. He used various sword techniques one after another, using everything he had. Now, the only things that Genshin could use were the fusion of the twin swords and the Inata Tower. The backlash from the fusion of the swords was just too powerful. Even if the Azulite swords would not be destroyed, he would definitely die as soon as he used the fusion of the twin swords. After all, the previous master of the twin swords, a grand exalt who stood at the apex of the immortals' world, had died from the backlash of using the fusion of the twin swords. As a result, Genshin did not dare to underestimate the terrifying backlash. Moreover, even if he used the fusion of the twin swords to kill the 2 mid-receival experts before him, or even kill all the Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints, the world of Forsaken Saints still had the even more terrifying Spirit King, as well as Xiongzhong and Ouyang Yangwen, 2 late returnants experts. As for the Inata Tower, it was completely useless in Genshin's hands aside from being an extremely heavy piece of metal. This was because he was unable to use the tower's power. Even if the Inata Tower blocked the tunnel with its own weight, the world of Forsaken Saints only needed to send a few Origin Realm experts to move the tower. Having lost its artifact spirit, the Inata Tower had gone from a living being to an inanimate object. It's a pity that the artifact spirit refuses to yield to me. Genshin sighed inside. He felt extremely regretful. Protector Shui sat on a bed of ice within the Ice Goddess Hall. She was completely covered by a layer of silver-white armor, hiding her appearance. Only her icy cold eyes could be seen. At this moment, she stared in the direction of the death nest deeply and murmured, "What a great formation." It's actually unrestricted by the seal, allowing the person who cultivates the cultivation method of the demon's world to reach the Origin Realm. Mo Tianyin, did you set up so many things in the death nest in order to help the person who cultivates the cultivation method of the demon's world? What are you scheming after expending so much effort to do all this? But no matter what you're scheming, it has nothing to do with me as long as you don't target Her Majesty. Blood-red clouds surged in the sky of the Tianyuan continent, filling the entire region. Houston sat in the clouds and extended a finger to the ground. The huge skeleton behind him immediately strode out of the clouds, appearing before everyone. When the experts of the Tianyuan continent saw the skeleton, they were all shocked. Disbelief filled their faces. They had all entered the death nest to fight for the saint's fruit, so they recognized the skeleton with a single glance. It was the terrifying existence in the depths of the death nest that had slaughtered them to the point of utter defeat. If it were not for the mysterious expert who had intervened in the final moment, many of them probably would not have been able to make it out alive. The skeleton produced a soundless roar and charged toward a receival expert from the world of Forsaken Saints with a huge bone club. At the same time, Houston struck out from within the blood-red cloud. The blood-red cloud that filled the entire sky rapidly shrank, condensing to a size of 10,000 meters. As it shrank, the demonic red light became even more dazzling and resplendent. The pressure that the receival experts felt became greater and greater as well. It was as if the existence of the blood-red cloud could greatly affect them. Suddenly, the blood-red clouds began to churn violently. A huge, ghostly face condensed from the clouds. It opened its vicious mouth and inhaled. Immediately, a tremendous presence appeared. Several dozen holy emperors from the world of forsaken saints were sucked into the ghostly face without being able to put up any resistance at all. With a series of chilling cries, all the holy emperors were corroded at a visible rate. They were reduced to a pool of blood that fused with the ghostly face. After absorbing the blood, the ghostly face, transformed from the blood cloud, seemed to have consumed a great tonic. It quickly solidified and became even more powerful than before. This person is strange. Let's go together and kill him on the spot. We'll obtain his cultivation method. Chapter 1541. The blood-red ghost face had blurry facial features. At this moment, it looked extremely ferocious, like a malicious spirit. It gave people a gloomy and terrifying feeling. Accompanied by the blood-red clouds that covered the sky, people couldn't help but feel their heads go numb. Just a glance was enough to make people's hair stand on end. The 3,000-meter-long face suddenly looked at the three receival experts, charging over from below with its empty eyes. It opened its huge mouth again and emitted a tremendous suction that enveloped the three receival experts. The suction was extremely terrifying, where even receival experts would struggle to resist it. The three receival experts, who were already charging toward the ghost face at terrifying speeds, immediately sped up when they were pulled in by the suction. The three receival experts from the world of forsaken saints were all stern. When they approached the mouth, a vast and terrifying energy surged out from their bodies, condensing into a suit of energy armor in the blink of an eye. It pulsed with powerful energy, while the weapons in their hands shot out several hundred meters of light that stabbed into the ghost face. The ghost face violently trembled after being attacked by the three receival experts. Its entire face became blurry, as if it was about to turn back into a thick, blood-red cloud. At the same time, the three receival experts were sucked into the ghost face's mouth and vanished. Their bodies were enveloped by an extremely dense, blood-red cloud, and they had vanished from everyone's sight. Everything before them had become blood-red. Even with their eyesight, they were unable to see through it. In the blood-red world of the ghost face, a presence that made their souls shiver suddenly appeared, causing the pressure on their hearts to become even heavier. Dense, blood-red mist constantly wrapped around them from all directions. When the mist came in contact with the armor condensed from energy on the surface of their bodies, it immediately produced a series of hissing sounds. Their energy armor began to melt at a visible rate. What tricks are you playing? Do you think you can fend off the three of us with a secret technique? Come out and fight us if you have the guts. A receival expert coldly snorted. A tremendous presence radiated from his body as his voice boomed out like thunder. It formed a visible sound wave that expanded in all directions. With that, he raised the huge sword in his hand. It shone with a scorching light and viciously swung it at the space before him with enough power to destroy the world. A gigantic sword light, hundreds of feet long, broke through the blood mist in front of him and shot forward with irresistible force. Wherever it passed, the surrounding blood mist shook violently and tumbled before finally disappearing at the end of the blood mist. At the same time, the other two receival experts struck out as well. Every single one of them was extremely powerful. Every single strike possessed supreme power, surpassing the limits of what the world could endure. As the three of them struck out together, the blood-red clouds that permeated the blood-red world seemed to become thinner. However, within the blood-red cloud, the energy armor on the three of them was constantly drained away. The mist in the surroundings seemed endless. Even if they could disperse some of it and clear out an empty space, it would immediately fill up again. The mist would constantly corrode their armor whenever it came in contact with the mist. It possessed an extremely powerful corrosive force, so the three of them did not dare to come in direct contact with the mist. All they could do was constantly expend their energy to maintain their armor. The white-haired Houston sat at the very center of the blood-red cloud. The sea of blood around him surged into the sky, producing a deep rumble. His eyes that seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life indifferently gazed at the three receival experts who had entered the blood-red cloud. He slowly raised his hand. The moment Houston raised his hand, the blood-red cloud immediately began to violently churn. Vaguely, countless ghosts seemed to emit a chilling howl. Vicious and terrifying faces constantly appeared in the churning cloud. They howled and roared, appearing and disappearing in the cloud. However, Houston did not seem to notice any of this. His eyes remained locked onto the three receival experts. He sat in the blood-red cloud and raised his hand, pointing at the three of them. With that, the blood-red cloud immediately began to violently churn. The ghostly faces that had been indistinct before became extremely clear now. They were completely composed of blood-red mist. They produced chilling howls and roars as they lunged at the three receival experts. There were so many of them that they seemed to be endless. The three receival experts could hear the bone-chilling shriek from very far away. All of them became extremely stern. "Humph, what a trick!" The three of them snorted coldly. They huddled together as caution filled their faces. It was also at this moment that the countless ghostly faces appeared before their eyes. They surged over from all directions, wrapping around the three of them in layers in a single moment. They began to gnaw away at their energy armor. Some of the ghosts even lunged at their heads. The vicious faces condensed from the blood-red mist silently fused with their heads when they came in contact with them. They wormed their way into their souls, causing their expressions to drastically change. They became pained. "Oh no, these things can actually harm the soul." One of them cried out. He directly struck out with his hand, conjuring a huge hand that was several hundred meters wide with origin energy. It crushed several thousand ghostly faces on the spot, causing all the ghosts in the surrounding area to vanish. But in the next moment, even more ghosts lunged over. The ghosts that had been crushed to pieces recondensed in the blood-red cloud after a few seconds, as if they were indestructible. The palm condensed from source energy had become much more illusionary after crushing countless malicious ghosts. This was because countless malicious ghosts had crawled all over the huge palm. Under the bites of these malicious ghosts, the palm rapidly dissipated, while the bloody cloud strengthened bit by bit. The three receival experts were enveloped by a layer of powerful origin energy to prevent the ghosts from entering their souls. The three of them used their full strength to kill countless ghosts, but as soon as they were slain, they would recondense in the next moment. They were unkillable. On the other hand, the origin energy of the three of them was constantly being devoured by the blood-red clouds. It was extremely draining. They wanted to find the caster of the blood-red clouds, but they seemed to have lost their eyes in the clouds. They were blind. They could not sense where the caster was at all. These things can't be killed at all. We've become completely passive in here. We can't continue like this. Retreat. An origin realm expert called out. Without any hesitation, the three of them immediately flew out. They could sense that the blood-red cloud was constantly absorbing their energy, becoming more and more powerful. Chapter 1542. The river of blood surged with boundless waves. It connected the sky and the ground, producing endless booms. Vaguely, one could hear the cries and howls of countless ghosts. The three receival experts from the world of forsaken saints were submerged in the river of blood. They immediately felt a mysterious power fill the river, constantly suppressing their strength. They were unable to use even 50% of their great strength. 50% was not enough for them to protect themselves in the river of blood. Their bodies bobbed up and down in the surging river, as insignificant as a boat in the ocean. They were unable to control themselves at all. In just a few seconds, the barrier condensed from origin energy around the three receival experts shattered in the river of blood. Their bodies were exposed in the river of blood. As the blood came in contact with their bodies, they immediately began to corrode at a visible rate. Their bodies rapidly melted in the river of blood. They were assimilated by the river of blood. Their bodies and origin energy had been converted into the river's energy. This was intolerable pain and torture. The three powerful receival experts all cried out miserably. They were unable to break free from the river of blood. The returnant's elder, who had not taken part in the battle, seemed to sense something when he saw that the three receival experts were about to die. He turned his head and stared at the blood-red cloud. A gleam of light immediately flashed through his eyes as he murmured to himself, "You're actually able to force an early receival expert and two mid-receival experts into such a state in such a short amount of time as an early receival expert, and it looks like you haven't even used your full strength. I've underestimated you before." With that, he no longer stood by and did nothing. He finally took the initiative to attack. Standing over 10 kilometers away, he directly threw a punch at the blood-red cloud. The punch shattered space. The space in a radius of 3,000 meters around him was reduced to darkness. An extremely terrifying ball of energy tore through space and struck the blood-red cloud over 10 kilometers away. Boom! A deafening boom rang out in the sky. The blood-red cloud began to tremble violently, and then it quickly collapsed. In just a few seconds, the entire blood-red cloud dispersed in the sky, revealing Houston, who had been hiding in the blood-red cloud the entire time. Houston stood in the air as his body violently trembled. A smear of paleness appeared on his face. Not only had the returnant's expert destroyed his blood-red cloud with a single punch, but he had also become quite injured. After all, he was only at early receival. Although he could kill mid-receival experts with the Empyrean demon arts, he was still not the opponent of returnant's experts. As the blood-red clouds dispersed, the three receival experts from the world of Forsaken Saints were freed as well. They had avoided death, but a small portion of their bodies had been melted away by the river of blood, so they seemed extremely terrifying. They were bathed in blood, and a small portion of their bodies had disappeared. Even their heads had shrunk by a few sizes. Their noses and ears had shrunk. The clouds had already disappeared. "All of you, go back and heal," the returnants coldly said. The returnant's expert said coldly. His eyes remained fixed on Houston the entire time as a strange light flickered in them. "Thank you for your help, Elder Zhang." The three receival experts no longer remained after thanking him. They all returned to the world of Forsaken Saints through the tunnel. Elder Zhang arrived before Houston. His face was cold and emotionless as he looked down at Houston from above. He asked, "What's the name of your cultivation method? It's actually so powerful." "The Empyrean demon arts," Houston said in a deep voice. His face became extremely solemn, and in his hand, an extremely tiny blood spike that was over a meter long suddenly appeared. The blood spike was filled with extremely pure soul-devouring energy as it stabbed towards Elder Zhang like a bolt of lightning. The cultivation method of the Blood Sword sect had originally been modified from the Empyrean demon arts, while the baleful Een force that the people of the Blood Sword sect cultivated was the soul-devouring force that had been greatly weakened. As a result, the soul-devouring force naturally possessed the characteristics of baleful Een force, and its strength was unknown. It was many times more powerful. When Houston stabbed out with his blood-red spike, Elder Zhang was affected by the soul-devouring force as well. He actually became momentarily dazed, but he was still a returnant's expert after all. He was far more powerful than Houston, so he recovered in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the blood-red spike in Houston's hand had already appeared before Elder Zhang's forehead. Elder Zhang's pupils suddenly shrank. At this critical moment, he used his palm to grab the blood spike. At the same time, his figure rapidly retreated, narrowly avoiding this fatal blow. However, a bright red bead of blood still appeared between Elder Zhang's eyebrows. The blood spike had already pierced through a layer of skin between his eyebrows, almost piercing through his head. A layer of cold sweat appeared on Elder Zhang's back. Blood constantly dripped from the hand he used to grab the blood-red spike. Even with the protection of origin energy, he was still injured. A soul attack? It's actually a soul attack. What kind of power do you use? It actually has the ability to attack the soul. Elder Zhang was no longer able to remain composed. He cried out in shock as he stared at Houston. But soon after, Elder Zhang's face revealed an excited expression. Before Houston could reply, he immediately said, "Hand over your cultivation method, and I'll spare your life." Elder Zhang's voice was filled with eagerness and greed. Houston's cultivation technique was very tempting to him. At this moment, he was even somewhat impatient to obtain such a cultivation technique. This was because the cultivation method was just too heaven-defying. Not only could it easily kill 2 mid-receival experts and 1 early receival expert as an early receival expert, it could even attack the soul. Even returnance experts would be in danger of dying if they were careless. Houston coldly snorted when he heard that Elder Zhang actually wanted his cultivation method. He said, "You have some insight. You know that I only possess such strength because of my extraordinary cultivation method and not because of various secret techniques. However, even if I give you my Empyrean demon arts, you don't have the right to cultivate it." Houston exerted some force with his right hand and pulled the blood-red spike from Elder Zhang's hand. Elder Zhang had originally only held the spike in his hand, so when the spike was pulled out, his hand became injured once again. It became bloody and his entire hand had almost been cut in half. Even though his palm was injured, Elder Zhang didn't seem to feel anything. He sneered, "Since you have the qualifications to cultivate it, I naturally have the qualifications to cultivate it as well. Since you aren't willing to hand it over, I can only personally take it. Even if the cultivation technique isn't with you, I have a method to directly extract it from your Yuan spirit. It's just that it's more troublesome. As for you, your Yuan spirit will collapse and you will die." A frightening light flickered through Elder Zhang's eyes. After witnessing the power of the Empyrean demon arts, he became determined to obtain it. He raised his bloody hand and powerful origin energy surged out, directly slamming it toward Houston. Houston showed no fear. The blood-red spike turned into a streak of red light and stabbed towards Elder Zhang with lightning-like speed. The soul-devouring force that permeated the blood-red spike affected Elder Zhang's soul immediately. With his first experience, Elder Zhang was already prepared. The moment Houston stabbed out with the blood-red spike, he immediately pulled back his hand and retreated in a hurry. As if he had teleported, he appeared several kilometers away in a single moment. The soul-devouring force was unable to affect him at such a distance. At the same time, a 4-meter-long sword appeared in his hand. He stabbed out, shattering space and sending an extremely powerful strand of sword chi towards Houston. The sword chi was just too fast, arriving before Houston in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the sword chi had locked onto Houston's presence, preventing him from dodging. He could only take it head-on. This was a powerful attack from a returnance expert. No matter how heaven-defying Houston's cultivation method was, he was still only at early receival. His face became extremely stern as he faced the terrifying sword chi. The soul-devouring force on the blood-red spike reached its limit before turning into a dazzling streak of red light to receive the huge sword chi. A thumb-sized, blood-red bead hovered above his head. It shone with a red light that enveloped Houston. Boom! With a boom, Houston's blood-red spike collided with the sword chi. The blood-red spike immediately dimmed while the linen cloth on his right arm was ripped apart, reduced to dust. The sword chi from Elder Zhang dimmed slightly after being obstructed by the blood-red spike, but its power was not to be underestimated. It did not slow down at all, colliding with the layer of red light from the Amigami. The Amigami was the famed treasure of the greatest demon monarch of the demon's world, the Empyrean demon monarch. It was an extremely powerful demonic artifact, but using the true power of the demonic artifact required extremely great strength. With Houston's strength at early receival, he probably could not even use 1/100th of the Amigami's power. As a result, the layer of red light from the Amigami only lasted for a few seconds before shattering under the attack of the sword chi. The remaining sword chi broke through the various obstructions and struck Houston's chest. Spurt! Houston opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face turned pale, and there was a terrifying sword wound on his chest. His blood had already dyed his linen clothes red. I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to hand over the Empyrean demon arts or not? If you hand it over, I won't make things difficult for you. But if you don't hand it over, I'll have to waste some effort and directly extract the cultivation method from your soul. You'll end up dead as well. Elder Zhang arrived before Houston. He was in no hurry to take action and ask for the cultivation method again. He was just far too tempted by the Empyrean demon arts. Chapter 1543. At this moment, a deafening tiger's roar rang out. A huge, white figure flew over from afar with a tremendous presence. He moved extremely quickly, as if he could pass through space. He could ignore the distance between them, appearing on the battlefield of the Tianyuan continent in the next moment from 10 million kilometers away. No one could clearly see the white figure's speed. Even the returnant's experts were no exception. All they saw was a blur before a huge, white figure appeared in the sky. It was a huge white tiger. It was several hundred meters tall, allowing it to hover in the air like a mountain. It gave off a tremendous pressure, causing the surroundings to tremble. Especially on the back of this huge white tiger, there was a pair of huge snow-white wings that were hundreds of feet long. They stretched out between heaven and earth as if they covered the sky and the sun. With a slight flash, a gust of wind blew between heaven and earth. The white tiger had finally completed the legacy of the beast god Hall. Its strength had increased drastically, allowing it to reach the origin realm. Although it was only at early receival, the tremendous pressure it gave off was enough to shock all the receival experts from the world of Forsaken Saints. At the same time, a gray mist seemed to revolve around the white tiger. It was extremely powerful and gave off a pressing presence of slaughter. The power seemed to belong to the world, surpassing origin energy. It made the eyes of all the returnance experts from the world of Forsaken Saints narrow. Not only had the white tiger reached receival in the beast god Hall, but it had also comprehended the truth of life and death. It had comprehended the way of slaughter and grasped the power of laws. It's the ancient winged tiger. Cries rang out in the surroundings. The people of the four races were familiar with the ancient divine beast, the winged tiger. They were all stunned when they saw the huge, 300-meter-tall white tiger. Suddenly, the white tiger raised its huge head and looked at outer space. It could clearly see the bloody Jianshin being surrounded by two mid-returnance experts. Its eyes immediately shone with a vicious light and became bright red. It radiated with a tremendous killing intent as it produced a deafening roar. It leapt into outer space, murderously. The white tiger immediately vanished with that leap. It seemed to be able to move through space, ignoring the distance between them. It appeared in outer space as if it had teleported. It swung its claws, and terrifying strands of slaughter enveloped one of the mid-returnance experts like a rain of light. A battle between man and tiger erupted. The mid-returnance experts feared the way of slaughter very much because it was the same as the way of the sword. It was a power of laws, the key to godhood. Normally, only godhood experts could grasp such a power. The white tiger had grasped the way of slaughter. Even though it was only at early receival, its battle prowess was extremely great. It was incomparable to ordinary people, unless it was an expert who had also grasped the power of laws. No one was its opponent at the same level of cultivation. Coupled with the fact that the mid-returnance expert feared the way of slaughter very much, the two of them were actually evenly matched. The pressure on Jianshin immediately decreased with the white tiger keeping a mid-returnance expert busy. He immediately used the time to heal. At the same time, he took out a droplet of juice from the amethyst spiritual bamboo and pressed it between his eyebrows with lightning-like speed, recovering his soul. Once he recovered to his peak condition, even two mid-returnance experts working together would not be his opponent. It was also at this moment that Poseidon became heavily injured. Under the combined attacks of the three Origin Realm experts, he was blown away while vomiting blood. The three Origin Realm experts immediately pursued him. They surrounded Poseidon in a triangle and struck out together, causing Poseidon to become covered in blood. His body had suffered unimaginable injuries and began to collapse. At the moment of life and death, Poseidon's soul decisively fled. He used a secret technique, burning the power of his soul in exchange for lightning-like speed. He vanished from the battlefield. With Poseidon's departure, one of the three receival experts immediately charged into the crowd below. He arrived before Kaia, who was commanding the soaring ants. Without saying anything, he grabbed Kaia and vanished into the distance. Kaia was only at the first heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor's strength. He was unable to fight back against an Origin Realm expert at all. However, as Kaia was taken away, the seven-colored heaven-devouring beast immediately became restless. It wanted to save Kaia, but its opponent kept it busy. It was unable to break free at all. Several million kilometers away from the battlefield was a barren mountain range. However, the entire mountain range was covered in a layer of snow-white snow. Although it was summer and the sun shone brightly in the sky, it was unable to melt the snow. It seemed like the entire world had become a wasteland of ice as far as the eye could see. At this moment, the sound of something passing through the air suddenly rang out. The receival expert had arrived in the snow-covered mountain range with Kaia. "What do you want?" Kaia coldly stared at the middle-aged man. There was no fear on her face at all. Instead, an iciness gradually radiated from her. However, there was still a sliver of despair in the depths of her eyes. The middle-aged man was covered in blood. Who knew whether it was his blood or Poseidon's? He calmly stared at Kaia and said, "I am Protector Xiang from the world of Forsaken Saints. You don't need to be nervous. I have no intentions of harming you. I just want you to serve me as my master and become my attendant. Impossible. You can kill me, but it's impossible for me to become your attendant," Kaia coldly replied. She was extremely determined. Xiang smiled. "You don't need to turn me down so quickly. Don't worry, I don't want you to serve me as my attendant. Instead, it's because I value your abilities. Those insects are under your command, and there's even a powerful magical beast that can contend against Origin Realm experts. It must have already accepted you as its master, or it wouldn't have paid attention to you so often when it was fighting against a protector. That's all I value because I need power like that. Now, are you willing to serve me as your master? Don't worry, I won't mistreat you." "In your dreams," Kaia coldly replied. She declined without any hesitation. She had already made up her mind. Even if she died here, she would not serve Xiang as her master. Xiang frowned slightly when he saw how determined Kaia was. He said, "Miss, I originally didn't want to harm you, but if you insist on doing this, I might have to do something that goes against my wishes." Kaia became rather pale, but she remained determined. "If that's the case, then kill me. It's impossible for me to accept you as my master." Xiang's face turned cold. A cold light flickered through his eyes as he said, "Since that's the case, don't blame me. However, since that powerful magical beast has already accepted you as its master, if I kill you, it'll probably regain its freedom even if it doesn't die. It'll be very difficult to subdue it, and that's not something I want to see. However, I just happen to know a puppet technique. I only need to disperse your soul and leave behind a sliver of your soul. I'll use this sliver of soul as a guide to refine you into a puppet. That way, I'll be able to control the insects through the puppet. Although it'll be rather troublesome and there's a certain chance of failure, It's the best method right now. However, what Xiang did not know was that the seven-colored heaven-devouring beast did not accept Kea as its master. Instead, it followed Kea willingly. It was basically obedient to Kea, as if they were master and servant. Kea did not know how to control the soaring ants either. They only obeyed Kea's orders because of the seven-colored, heaven-devouring beast. Kaya paled when she heard that. She staggered backwards, unconsciously. As soon as she thought about how Xiang wanted to refine a sliver of her soul into a puppet, she shivered. After a moment of hesitation, she gritted her teeth and struck her forehead viciously. She wanted to end her own life right there and then. She knew that it was impossible for her to flee before an Origin Realm expert. She could only make this choice in order to prevent herself from being refined into a puppet. However, how could Xiang just watch Kea commit suicide? He grabbed Kea's hand and said coldly, "You overestimate yourself if you want to commit suicide right before me." With that, Xiang extended a finger towards Kea's forehead. His finger was like a sharp blade, piercing through Kea's forehead and into the base of his finger. Blood flowed from Kea's forehead. Kea's face was filled with pain. Xiang's finger had pierced through her head and had basically reached her soul. At that moment, Kea's soul was trapped by an invisible force. She could not abandon her body and flee. "I only need a sliver of your soul to refine you into a puppet. You can disperse the rest," said Xiang. He gently pressed down on Kea's soul with his finger. Chapter 1544. Am I going to die just like this? Am I going to be reduced to a puppet under someone else's control? As she slowly approached death, Kea felt both liberated and extremely unwilling. Even now, she still held unforgettable feelings for the Kaler tribe that had once raised her. She could never forget her father who had cared for her since she was young. The destruction of the Kaler tribe had always been the greatest pain in Kea's heart. Now that she was about to die, Kea, who had never been able to forget about the Kaler tribe, felt liberated instead. However, she was very unwilling to be reduced to a puppet under someone else's control after her death. However, the difference in strength between her and an Origin Realm expert was just too great. Even though she was unwilling to accept this, she was powerless to change anything. Kea's consciousness became more and more blurry. The intense pain from the collapse of her soul instead became weaker and weaker. Her pain gradually vanished as she walked towards death step by step. Xiang became extremely stern. He had obtained a method to create puppets from an ancient text. He had never used it before, so today was his first time trying it out. As a result, he was extremely careful. The speed at which he collapsed Kea's soul was extremely slow as well. He was afraid that he would accidentally cause Kea's soul to completely disperse, leaving behind not a single strand of her soul. If he had the time, Xiang would not have refined the puppet in such a hurry. He would have definitely captured a few holy emperors to test it out first, accumulating enough experience and grasping the technique before actually trying it out. However, he did not have the time to slowly test it out right now. He knew that the other protectors and even the elders of the Sacred Spirit Hall would probably notice Kea before long. Once a protector or an elder who was more powerful than him became interested in Kea, he would not be able to contend against them with his strength. As a result, he had moved on Kea in such a hurry. He wanted to refine Kea into a puppet in the shortest amount of time possible so that he could control the seven-colored heaven-devouring beast and the countless soaring ants. Once Kea became his puppet, everything would belong to him. At that time, even if the elders became greedy, there would be nothing for him to fear because the current Spirit King would never allow Origin Realm experts to kill each other. As he collapsed Kea's soul, a strand of Xiang's soul entered Kea's sea of consciousness. He used the power of his soul to protect a strand of Kea's soul so that he could refine it into a puppet. However, as soon as Xiang's soul entered Kea's sea of consciousness, he became completely stunned. At that moment, he discovered to his great surprise that although Kea's soul was not powerful, His sea of consciousness was extremely vast. It was like a boundless universe. It was unbelievably large, as if it was boundless. What is this sea of consciousness? Why is it so large? Shiyang was completely stunned. He was deeply stunned by the tremendous sea of consciousness. At that moment, he did not feel like he had arrived in a person's sea of consciousness. Instead, he felt like he had arrived in a boundless universe. He had never seen such a vast sea of consciousness before. As a matter of fact, he had never even heard of one before. His soul was actually so insignificant in the sea of consciousness, as if he was an ant in the heavens. At this moment, a dazzling light came from the depths of the sea of consciousness. It spread through the entire sea of consciousness at an unbelievable speed. In just a short moment, the sea of consciousness, which was as vast as the universe, was completely occupied by this intense light. It filled every corner of the sea of consciousness. An entire sea of consciousness was illuminated like it was daytime. A hazy figure silently appeared within the endless white light. It was slender and illusionary. It was enveloped by a sacred light, such that only a blurry figure could be seen. The figure silently arrived before Shiyang's soul. It did not do anything, but Shiyang's soul produced a chilling cry. His soul collapsed in a single moment, turning into pure soul power that fused with the hazy figure. Shiyang vomited blood as he stood outside the sea of consciousness. His face became extremely pale at that moment, devoid of any color. His face was filled with intense fear. What is that? Shiyang roared out crazily inside. The hazy figure had actually wiped out a strand of his soul effortlessly. He did not even know how the power of the soul had been wiped out, and even the power of the soul had been completely absorbed. This strange sight filled him with fear. Without any hesitation, Shiyang immediately turned around and fled. At that moment, he had even lost interest in killing Kaya. The only thought in his head was to flee as quickly as possible, leaving this place as soon as possible. It was also at this moment that Kaya suddenly opened her eyes. Blood oozed from her forehead, but her gaze was extremely terrifying. Just her gaze possessed unbelievable power. Just a single glance was enough to make the space within a radius of 1,000 kilometers collapse. The mountains in that range were reduced to ashes at that moment as well. Only the mountain below Kea remained. It had become the only mountain in that region. Shiyang, who had reached the origin realm, was reduced to ashes at that moment as well. He lost consciousness in a single moment. His powerful soul turned into pure soul power that drifted into Kea's forehead. Under that gaze, an origin realm expert who had surpassed the Holy Emperor had actually died without being able to put up any resistance. Even Shiyang himself had no idea what had killed him before he died. Shiyang's body dispersed in the surroundings. There was no corpse, only ashes that drifted down from the sky. It fused with the ashes of the countless mountains in the surroundings. It was no longer possible to tell whether it was Shiyang's corpse or not. At this moment, Kea slowly raised her head. She looked at outer space. Under her gaze, the tremendous formation hidden in outer space immediately trembled violently. The powerful formation that had been personally cast down by Protector Shui and secretly cast down by the ice goddess from a great distance away actually showed signs of collapsing at that moment. It was as if it could not withstand the gaze. That gaze was simply too powerful. In fact, the life and death of this entire world would be determined by that gaze. The presence of the ice goddess. Kea murmured as she stared at the huge formation. However, in the next moment, her body shook violently and she almost fell to the ground. The light in her eyes rapidly dimmed as well. "I am too weak. It's not time for me to wake up yet," Kea murmured. Her voice was extremely weak. She shook violently again before closing her eyes and fainting. At the same time, Protector Shui suddenly opened her eyes. Her cold, emotionless eyes were filled with shock and panic at that moment. Chapter 1545. Who is it who discovered this place and almost caused the formation to collapse? Protector Shui stared at the sky as she stood in the divine hall. She seemed to have fused with the surroundings, but she no longer possessed her composure and confidence as if the entire world was under her control. Instead, she was filled with surprise and shock. With a single movement, Protector Shui appeared in outer space, far away from the Tianyuan continent. The colossal planet where the Tianyuan continent resided was only the size of a head in her eyes because it was just too far away. Protector Shui glanced through the surroundings as she expanded the senses of her soul in an attempt to find some clues. However, she failed to discover anything even after searching for quite some time. She also failed to sense any presence that could cause the formation to collapse in the surroundings. There was not even the slightest pulse of energy that was out of the ordinary. This person shouldn't be in this world. He almost caused the formation to collapse earlier, which means he has already taken action. He has used power that surpasses godhood. The laws here definitely won't allow that kind of power. It'll definitely be rejected by the laws and lead to tremendous ripples. It's impossible for it to be so calm unless that person has reached Grand Prime and can make the laws here tremble. However, even if Grand Primes don't do anything, they'll still cause a large region of space to collapse. However, the space here seems to be fine. It's calm. No Grand Primes have personally come, so that person must still be in the Saints' world right now. I just wonder which great figure discovered this place, and whether they're a friend or foe. In the past, before Her Majesty found the world where Her Majesty had reincarnated, she had asked a few old friends to search for it together. If the expert who just found this place is a friend, there's no need to worry too much. But if they're an enemy, Protector Shui became extremely stern. She silently vanished, and in the next moment, she had crossed a great distance and appeared in a secret room within the Ice Goddess Hall. With a wave of her hand, the door to the room closed with a heavy thud. Protector Shui sat in the center of the room. Immediately, an indescribably tremendous pressure radiated from her. The pressure was countless times more powerful than that of Returnant's experts. If even a sliver of it leaked out, it would cause the world to change and space to shatter. Even the Tianyuan continent would be reduced to dust. However, in the secret room of the Ice Goddess Hall, the pressure that could even make the world yield was tightly sealed within. It was unable to spread out at all, nor was it able to shake the room at all. Protector Shui was in a daze as a gleam of light shone in her eyes. She constantly formed seals with her hands before her chest, and with each seal, an extremely great power would radiate. The power had completely exceeded the origin realm. It was the supreme power of godhood, or even the peak of godhood. She was trying to divine whether the cultivator from the upper worlds who had discovered this place was a friend or foe. She did not directly divine the identity of this cultivator. She knew that the cultivator from the upper worlds who had discovered this place was very powerful and was not someone she could divine. If she forced herself to do so, not only would she not be able to divine his identity, but she would also suffer an extremely serious backlash. She might even attract the attention of that cultivator. As a result, she completely focused on the side this time. She used some of the information she had gathered to determine the expert's identity and whether they were a friend or foe. This was extremely important to her. It was directly related to the survival of the snow goddess, so she could not afford to be careless. The movements of Protector Shui and the terrifying formation that sealed the world did not raise the attention of Genshin's group or the experts from the world of Forsaken Saints. All of them had no idea what had just happened. Only Fairy Haoyue of the Bright Moon Divine Hall opened her eyes at basically the same time as Protector Shui. She raised her head and stared at the sky. Although she was only a soul, her gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the Bright Moon Divine Hall. She saw how the formation was about to collapse at that moment. Fairy Haoyue was also rather stern, but she returned to normal very soon as if nothing had happened. The battle on the Tianyuan continent was still extremely intense. The numbers of the four races decreased as they suffered extremely heavy casualties. The shockwaves from the battle between so many Holy Emperor experts and even Origin Realm experts had caused extremely heavy damage to the Tian Yuan continent. The entire continent constantly shook as cracks spread out like a spider's web. It was as if the beautiful continent had been divided into regions. The entire continent was no longer complete, having been split into 4 by 4 extremely thick cracks. Jianqin gradually recovered from his wounds in outer space. He gradually gained the upper hand against a mid-returnance expert. Once he completely recovered, killing the mid-returnance expert would be a piece of cake. Suddenly, a powerful strand of sword chi with a chilling killing intent emerged from the spatial tunnel. It transformed into a dragon that soared into the sky, sweeping through space and wreaking havoc in the surroundings. It caused space to collapse and the world to tremble. Its might was so great that it directly suppressed all the experts present, drawing the attention of countless people. They were all extremely shocked. "It's Elder Ouyang. Elder Ouyang has come. I'd like to see how these people endure Elder Ouyang's fury." The experts from the world of Forsaken Saints immediately cried out, while the Receival Protectors all let out a sigh of relief. They all knew how powerful Elder Ouyang was. Once he took action, no one in this world would be able to stop him. The white-robed, extremely handsome Ouyang Yangwen walked out of the tunnel at a steady pace. His face was sunken as he radiated with a tremendous presence. Unconcealable fury was present as well. He was the most powerful person below the Spirit King in the world of Forsaken Saints. He was the Grand Elder who ranked first among the 8 Returnance Elders. His status was only below the Spirit King in the world of Forsaken Saints. However, as soon as he had arrived in this world, Jianqin had used a treasure that belonged to the world of Forsaken Saints to trap him. He just happened to be saved by Xiongzhong in the end. So how could the proud Ouyang Yangwen accept this? This was a humiliation to him, a great humiliation that he could not wash away. Chapter 1546. All the people from the world of Forsaken Saints were in high spirits with what Ouyang Yangwen had said. Let alone the Holy Emperor. Even the Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints felt the same. All of them had blind confidence in Ouyang Yangwen. This was not because Ouyang Yangwen was a noble person, but because of his strength. In particular, the Origin Realm elders and protectors from the world of Forsaken Saints who had some understanding of Ouyang Yangwen knew just how great his battle prowess was. Although Ouyang Yangwen was only at late returnance, he had gained some vague comprehension of the way of the sword. Although he had not truly grasped the way of the sword like the Spirit King and comprehended the power of laws, it was still extremely impressive. The protectors and elders even believed that Ouyang Yangwen possessed the strength to fight against experts who had just reached reciprocity. Jianqin's expression changed slightly in outer space. He suddenly turned his head toward the Tian Yuan continent. Even though the Tian Yuan continent had shrunk countless times in his eyes, he could still see Ouyang Yangwen emerge from the tunnel with a single glance. His face sank. I never thought that Ouyang Yangwen would break free so quickly. The Spirit King must have removed the disc that trapped him, Jianqin thought. He felt that the situation was bad. Even when he was in his peak condition, it would be rather difficult for him to fight Xiongzhong. Ouyang Yangwen's strength was even greater than Xiongzhong's. Even if he was in peak condition, he probably would not be Ouyang Yangwen's opponent, let alone when he was still injured. Suddenly, Ouyang Yangwen struck out. He spread his hand, and a finger-sized sword suddenly appeared. It hovered above his palm, and in the next moment, the toothpick-like sword suddenly expanded, becoming a 4-meter-long sword. It shone with a sharp light. Ouyang Yangwen twisted his wrist and gripped the sword tightly. At that moment, the sword immediately erupted with an extremely powerful pulse. Under the pulse of energy, the sky shook and the ground cracked. He took a step forward, and his presence suddenly skyrocketed. As he took a step forward, he stabbed out with the sword in his hand with lightning speed. A huge strand of sword chi broke free from the restraints of the sword and shot toward Changyang Mingyue with lightning-like speed, shattering space along the way. Ouyang Yangwen's first target was not Jianqin, but Changyang Mingyue. Changyang Mingyue's clothes were whiter than snow as her snow-white hair fluttered without any wind. Her eyes became extremely stern at that moment. A new ability had appeared in her head. It was the same as the domain of the snow goddess and bind to fate. She had no recollection of the ability before, but it had suddenly appeared in her head. Changyang Mingyue had no time to think. She immediately used the ability that had just appeared in her head. She extended the fingers of her left hand, and a strand of snow-white, profound ice chi radiated from them. She quickly drew a circle in front of her, and the circle turned into an ice mirror the moment it was completed. It reflected Ouyang Yangwen standing outside the tunnel and the extremely powerful sword chi that rapidly approached him. When the sword chi and the ice mirror came into contact, the ice mirror suddenly flashed with white light. Silently, a crack appeared on the ice mirror and quickly spread like a spider web. In an instant, it covered the entire ice mirror, and finally, with a crisp sound, it cracked inch by inch. The moment the mirror shattered, Changyang Mingyue grunted and vomited a mouthful of blood. At the same time, the strand of sword chi that Ouyang Yangwen had shot out seemed to be repelled. It was reflected back at Ouyang Yangwen, but its power had decreased by half. A gleam of light flashed through Ouyang Yangwen's eyes as a gentle smile appeared on his face. He said, "Interesting. I've never seen a move like this before. It can actually reflect my sword chi." With that, Ouyang Yangwen shot out a second strand of sword chi. It was even more powerful than before. The second strand of sword chi collided with the first, and with a great boom, the first strand of sword chi directly dispersed. However, the second strand of sword chi continued toward Changyang Mingyue without weakening at all. Changyang Mingyue gritted her teeth and used the ice mirror again. However, the mirror failed to reflect the sword chi this time and was shattered. The sword chi passed through Changyang Mingyue's body. Changyang Mingyue vomited 3 mouthfuls of blood as she was blown away. She had suffered extremely heavy injuries. Ouyang Yangwen raised his sword high above his head and immediately shot out a 3,000-meter-long streak of light. It stabbed into the sky, and from afar it seemed like a huge pillar of light that stood in the sky, shattering space. Pitch-black cracks appeared one by one in the space around the pillar of light before shooting to the side with an unstoppable force, heading toward Tai Ta. Tai Ta's expression also became serious. His aura instantly rose to the peak. The powerful battle condensed on his body and did not dissipate. Finally, it formed an illusory battle axe above his head. As he raised the dazzling battle axe in his hand, it immediately merged with the illusory battle axe formed by battle will. Immediately, an even more powerful aura erupted from the golden battle axe. Mysteries of war, destruction. Tai Ta called out as he swung his axe toward Ouyang Yangwen's streak of light with a dazzling golden light. The power of the attack had completely exceeded Tai Ta's personal strength. Even mid-returnance experts would need to treat the attack seriously. Boom! The two attacks collided, immediately erupting with a deafening sound. Terrifying ripples of energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings as a storm, spreading out in all directions. The entire region violently shook and distorted. The Tianyuan continent below was struck by the ripples of energy. A large portion of the continent, which had already been split into 4, immediately collapsed, causing a great earthquake that covered the entire continent. Even from 1,000,000 kilometers away, many cities collapsed. However, Ouyang Yangwen's sword chi was not shattered by Tai Ta's attack. A small portion of it remained, forming a 3-meter-long streak of light that shot toward Tai Ta with a resplendent glow. Tai Ta's eyes narrowed. It was already too late for him to counter the sword chi that was inches away. He immediately blocked with his golden axe. With a boom, Tai Ta was blown away by the powerful ripples of energy. Before he could stabilize himself, his left hand immediately shone with a dazzling golden light as he punched at Ouyang Yongwen from afar. He called out, "Mysteries of War, Space-Destroying Nether Fist." Chapter 1547. Tai Ta's punch did not have the power to destroy the world, nor did it have a powerful energy wave. It did not even cause a ripple. It gave off the feeling that it was an ordinary person's punch. However, Ouyang Yongwen's eyes narrowed at that moment. Without any hesitation, he immediately retreated. The moment he retreated, the space where he had been standing silently collapsed. It was plunged into darkness. Vaguely, there was a terrifying energy wreaking havoc. This energy was invisible to the naked eye, as if it had fused with space itself. Even the senses of the soul would find it difficult to detect. Only when it erupted would one be able to detect it. However, Tai Ta's space-destroying nether fist seemed to have locked onto Ouyang Yongwen's presence. The energy that seemed to have fused with space rapidly charged towards him. Wherever it passed, space collapsed. A cold light flashed through Ouyang Yongwen's eyes. A sliver of anger appeared in his eyes. He could sense that Tai Ta's true strength was not at returnance. To think that he, the greatest elder of the sacred spirit hall, would actually dodge someone who had not even reached returnance. This was unforgivable to him. Ouyang Yongwen suddenly swung out with his sword. Immediately, a sword domain expanded, enveloping the space within a radius of several hundred meters. It seemed to form another domain. The space within the domain trembled gently before collapsing. The entire region was plunged into darkness. The strange power of the Iron Tower Void Annihilation Fist, which seemed to have merged with the void, also dissipated in the collapsing void. At the same time, Ouyang Yongwen did not stop at all. He seemed to have turned into a blur as he shot toward Tai Ta with lightning speed with surging sword chi. He pierced through Tai Ta's chest in a single moment, piercing through his entire body. Spurt! Tai Ta spat out a mouthful of golden blood. An extremely thin wound had appeared on his chest as strands of golden blood flowed out. Ouyang Yongwen's attack was extremely terrifying. Not only did his sword pierce Tai Ta's body, but he had also entered Tai Ta's body as a blur. He passed through Tai Ta's body like a sword, but he only left behind a wound that was only 3 fingers long. Tai Ta's face instantly turned extremely pale. His expression was dispirited. His body swayed a few times in the air before falling from the sky. Ouyang Yongwen did not even glance at Tai Ta. He swung his sword and sent a powerful strand of sword chi toward Xiao Jin. The sword chi cut through Xiao Jin's waist, cleaving him in half. Blood dyed the sky red. Xiao Jin let out a painful shriek. The 2 halves of his body fell from the sky at the same time. Golden blood continued to spray out, causing a golden rain of blood to fall from the sky. In outer space, Chanyang Mingyue's chest had been pierced by Ouyang Yongwen's sword chi. Tai Ta had been pierced by Ouyang Yongwen's ability. He had turned into a blur and entered Tai Ta's body before emerging from his back. Tai Ta had suffered an unimaginable injury, and Xiao Jin had been cleaved in half by Ouyang Yongwen's sword. Jianqin's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when he saw this. He was utterly furious as his killing intent skyrocketed. Jianqin roared out furiously and abandoned his mid-origin realm opponent. The azulate swords shone with a dazzling light as they accompanied him. He seemed to have turned into a dazzling sword, charging toward Ouyang Yongwen with killing intent as he illuminated the surroundings with a radiant light. The white tiger worried about Jianqin's safety, so he also abandoned his opponent. He produced a deafening whistle and charged toward Ouyang Yongwen. The 2 mid-returnance experts did not stop them. Instead, they sneered as they stared at Jianqin and the white tiger, with the Grand Elder Ouyang personally taking action. There was nothing that could not be resolved. The 2 of them could even imagine what would happen to Jianqin and the white tiger. A cold light appeared in Ouyang Yongwen's eyes when he saw Jianchen. Out of all the Origin realm experts on the Tianyuan continent, the only person he hated the most was Jianchen. This was because Jianchen had used the disc to trap him, causing him, the greatest elder of the sacred spirit hall, to make a fool of himself before everyone. He had lost all his dignity, and in the end he was saved by Xiongzhong, who had always been at odds with him. So he owed Xiongzhong a favor. Although there was no irreconcilable enmity between him and Xiongzhong, they had always been enemies. There had been various small conflicts between them in the past. They were basically like fire and water, yet now he actually owed Xiongzhong a favor. This was something that Ouyang Yongwen could not accept. I heard from Xiongzhong that your name is Jianchen. You're someone who has comprehended the way of the sword, like the Spirit King. I originally wanted to deal with you last, but since you've come to die, I can only fulfill your wish and send you on your way first. Ouyang Yongwen's tone was very light, but it gave off a sinister feeling as if he was facing a venomous snake. He truly wanted to kill Jianchen. It had been many years since he had last felt such killing intent. Ouyang Yongwen's sword suddenly trembled and produced a clanging sound. The tip of the sword constantly trembled, and with a clear thrum, it shot into the sky as a streak of light. Jianchen formed a seal with his hands, and the twin swords became several hundred meters long in a single instance. They shone with dazzling light as they intertwined with one another. They violently collided with Ouyang Yongwen's sword with an unstoppable force. Boom! A great boom erupted from the collision, becoming the only sound in the surroundings. It completely drowned out the cries of battle below. A few of the Holy Emperor's heads buzzed from the impact as blood oozed from their ears. The twin swords were knocked back. Jianchen quickly shot over from behind and grabbed the Ziying's sword that had been knocked back. He used the light from the sword to protect himself, making him shine like a miniature sun. He resisted the violent shockwaves of energy and began to engage in a great battle with Ouyang Yongwen. The two of them engaged in an intense battle in the shattered space. Only flashes of light could be seen from the outside. Fragments of sword chi shot out in all directions like rain. Even though they were in the shattered space, the cracks were unable to harm the two of them at all. As a matter of fact, the cracks did not even affect them. In just a short while, the two of them had already clashed several dozen times. Their battle was earth-shattering, causing the sun and moon to dim. In the end, the two of them passed each other extremely quickly and came to a temporary stop. Droplets of blood splattered in the air. Every single droplet pulsed with powerful energy. Jianchen was covered in blood. He had already gained several vicious and terrifying sword wounds. One of them had even pierced through his entire chest. His right arm was a bloody mess as blood dripped from his entire body. Before him, Jianchen's white robes had been ripped in many places. His beautiful robes were stained with blood as well. However, the blood did not belong to him. Instead, it belonged to Jianchen. Chapter 1548. Jianchen remained silent. He glared at Ouyang Yongwen. His heart was very heavy. He knew that Ouyang Yongwen's words were very reasonable. With his current injuries, it would not be difficult for Ouyang Yongwen to kill him if he used his full strength. He had already used his full strength in his clash with Ouyang Yongwen earlier without holding back at all. However, Ouyang Yongwen was only probing him. If Ouyang Yongwen had used his full strength in the battle earlier, Jianchen might not even have the strength to remain standing right now. Ouyang Yongwen was just too powerful. He was much more powerful than Xiongzhong. At this moment, a deafening roar rang out. The white tiger had already grown to 3 meters in length. Its snow-white siu was wide open as inscriptions flickered. Every single inscription hid a mysterious and great power. A powerful force of slaughter permeated its claws as it swiped at Ouyang Yongwen with the power to destroy space. The moment the white tiger struck out, Jianchen struck out as well. Even though he was extremely injured, his presence did not weaken at all. He was cold as he shot toward Ouyang Yangwen, like a sword radiating with surging sword chi. He knew that the white tiger was not Ouyang Yangwen's opponent, so he needed to save him as soon as possible. Faced with Jianqin and the white tiger's pincer attack, Ouyang Yangwen remained composed. He said with some surprise, "I never thought that there would be two experts who have comprehended laws in this world. It's just a pity that your cultivation is just too low even though you've comprehended laws. As for the tiger, if you could reach returnants, even early returnants, I wouldn't be your opponent. Even some experts who have reached reciprocity wouldn't be able to defeat you. It's just a pity that you're only at early receival." Ouyang Yangwen shook his head in some pity as he looked at the white tiger. Comprehending laws at early reciprocity was already extremely terrifying. At the very least, countless reciprocity experts had appeared in the world of forsaken saints over the countless years. There were even quite a few who had reached peak reciprocity. However, the only person who had comprehended laws was the current Spirit King. However, Ouyang Yangwen had to kill such a talented prodigy today. He had already become an enemy, so if he did not eliminate him today, he would become a huge problem once he truly matured in the future. Ouyang Yangwen turned around and struck out with lightning-like speed. The sword in his hand radiated with powerful sword chi, turning into a silver streak of light that stabbed toward the white tiger's claws. The sword clashed with the extremely sharp claws of the tiger, producing the clear sound of metal clashing. The force of slaughter on the white tiger's claws rapidly dispersed when it came in contact with the sword. Although this was the power of laws, the difference between the white tiger and Ouyang Yangwen was just too great. It was no longer enough to pose a threat to Ouyang Yangwen. In the blink of an eye, the white tiger's force of slaughter had been dispersed by Ouyang Yangwen. With a jolt of his sword, a powerful sword chi immediately surged out, landing on the white tiger's claws like a sharp blade. Ding! The white tiger's claws were extremely tough. Not only was the sword chi unable to cut through them, but it even shattered with white sparks, turning into countless stray strands of sword chi that shot off in all directions. Not every part of the white tiger's body was as tough as its claws. His paws were immediately affected by the strands of sword chi, causing them to become bloody. Every single strand of sword chi that struck the white tiger's paws created a hole in the white tiger's body. Some of the strands of sword chi even struck the white tiger's body, immediately disappearing into it. The white tiger trembled and produced a deep roar in pain. At that moment, the Siyu on its back suddenly shone with endless light. Countless inscriptions flickered and pulsed, radiating with powerful pulses of energy. Within the endless light, the Siyu immediately stood upright, forming a blade that shone like the sun. Profound inscriptions revolved around the Siyu. In the end, as the white tiger flipped forward, the blade formed from the Siyu on its back immediately slashed towards Ouyang Yangwen with a terrifying presence. The moment the Siyu slashed down, a mysterious power immediately expanded and trapped Ouyang Yangwen. Ouyang Yangwen's eyes suddenly narrowed as a smear of shock appeared on his face. At that moment, he discovered that not only had his body been trapped by a mysterious power, but his comprehension of the mysteries of space and his connection with the energy of the world had vanished the moment the white light slashed down. At that moment, he could no longer sense the energy of the world in this world. He could not even control spatial force, as if it had been forcefully severed. What ability is this white tiger using? It's actually so powerful. If it uses this ability against experts of the same level, who can withstand it? Ouyang Yangwen became rather stern. At that moment, heavy killing intent appeared in his eyes as he looked at the white tiger. The more extraordinary the white tiger was, the more he wanted to kill it. Otherwise, once the white tiger matured, he would no longer be its opponent. Ouyang Yangwen's body trembled as his late returnant's strength surged out without holding back. He broke free from the mysterious power in a single instant and stabbed his sword toward the Siyu. Boom! With a great boom, the white tiger was blown away. The Siyu that had fused together separated once again. The endless white light rapidly dispersed, and the Siyu dimmed. All the inscriptions had vanished. As the little white tiger flew backward, it spat out blood continuously. Its expression was dispirited and showed signs of weakness. Ouyang Yongwen's body swayed a few times as well. He took a step back uncontrollably before stabbing out with his sword, forcing back Jianqin. Afterwards, he immediately stabbed out a second time, which collided with the Ziying sword. The Ziying sword was immediately knocked away, while Ouyang Yongwen used the momentum to stab toward Jianqin's forehead. He wanted to kill Jianqin for good. A gleam of light flashed through Jianqin's eyes. At that critical moment, Qing Sua's sword flew over and collided with Ouyang Yongwen's sword. Jianqin retreated rapidly. Jianqin, today is your doomsday. You will be the first expert I kill in this world. Once I'm done with you, I'll end that white tiger, Ouyang Yongwen said with a feminine voice. He stepped into the air and pursued Jianqin. A sliver of sorrow appeared in Jianqin's eyes. He glanced at the Tianyuan continent below. The Tianyuan continent had suffered a crushing defeat. Taita, Changyang Mingyue, Shao Jin, and Houston were all heavily injured, while Yang Lai, Gui Haidao, and Feng Xiaotian had vanished from the battlefield. The returnant's expert, who had been fighting Taita, had turned around to deal with Shangguan Mu, after Taita had retreated from the battlefield. Shangguan Mu was also heavily injured and covered in blood. Aside from Shaoling, who had fought Gong Shiming, all the other Origin Realm experts on the Tianyuan continent were heavily injured. Is the Tianyuan continent heading towards its end just like this? Jianqin murmured. His voice was filled with sorrow. Behind him was his home. If the front lines could not be stopped, his parents, family, friends, and acquaintances would all die. Chapter 1549. Jianqin had no other choice now that he was at the end of his rope. He could only fuse the azulite swords and erupt with devastating power. He could produce the most dazzling light possible and turn the situation around. If he did not do that, the Tianyuan continent would not be able to escape death today. Not only would he die, but his parents, his many relatives in Changyang Prefecture, and by Lian and the others in Flame City would all die as well. Although he probably would not be able to endure the powerful backlash from fusing the twin swords and end up in the same fate as the previous master of the swords, he would still die anyway. However, dying like this would allow him to obtain the power to kill Ouyang Yongwen. He would be able to kill Ouyang Yongwen before him, and even have the power to kill all the Origin Realm experts on the Tianyuan continent. He would deal a heavy blow to the world of Forsaken Saints, and by some time for the Tianyuan continent. Master, don't fuse the twin swords. With your current strength, you won't be able to endure the backlash at all. You'll be wiped out, Master. Stop. Master still has the Inata Tower. You can hide in the Inata Tower and let it enter the chaotic streams of space. You can avoid this disaster. Master, don't fuse the twin swords. Master's future is limitless. You can't die here. The sword spirits immediately cried out when they sensed Jianqin's intentions. They were clearly extremely worried. They were undying existences. Although the fusion of the twin swords would not be able to destroy them and would only return them to their weakest state, Jianqin would still die because the backlash was just too powerful. When the twin swords were ranked among the 10 great god artifacts of the Immortals world, even one of the 5 grand exalts of the Immortals world had died from the backlash. Although the twin swords were only immortal artifacts right now and were nowhere near god artifacts, the backlash was still not something Jianqin could endure right now. They didn't want Jianqin to fall here because they could see a corner of Jianqin's future. If Jianqin could grow up smoothly, he would definitely reach an unimaginable height in the future. But now, Jianqin had completely cast aside his own life. The method the sword spirits had told him could indeed allow him to survive, but he would never abandon his family and friends to survive by himself. The azulite swords hovered above Jianqin's head in the form of 2 huge swords. The tips of the swords pointed towards the sky as they shone with an extremely dazzling azure and violet light, dyeing the entire region violet and azure. At that moment, the blinding light completely eclipsed the sun, becoming the only color in the world. When it shone on the Tianyuan continent, the entire continent was dyed purple and azure. At the same time, an extremely terrifying pulse vaguely appeared. The pulse was so powerful that it caused the entire region of space to tremble. It was as if it possessed the power to split the world apart, causing the world to tremble in fear. The moment the terrifying ripples appeared, the intense battle on the Tianyuan continent came to a halt. Everyone stared at the sky that was enveloped by the azure and violet light in shock. The ripples made all of them shiver from the depths of their souls, as if they were facing the end of the world. Xiaoling and Gongximing could not help but stop as well. They stared at Jianqin in shock. Ouyang Yangwen's handsome, slightly feminine face suddenly changed at that moment. He became extremely stern as a smear of fear appeared in the depths of his eyes. He was the first person Jianqin wanted to kill, so he felt the pulse the most. The terrifying pulse actually made him feel like he was about to die. The azulate swords had not fused yet. They were only showing signs of fusing right now. A complete fusion would still require some time. But even with that being the case, the power they erupted with was enough to make people shiver. At the beginning of chaos, Yin and Yang were split from chaotic force. The sword spirits of the azulate swords were originally spirits born from Yin and Yang Qi. If they fused, the Yin and Yang would fuse and return to chaos. This chaos was true chaos. It was the most powerful energy at the beginning of the world. It was not something Jianqin's impure chaotic force could compare to. The Ziying sword and the Qing Suo sword gradually fused together. Slivers of supreme Yin force and supreme Yang force radiated from them. When they came into contact from time to time, they would immediately erupt with devastating pulses. During the process of fusing, the two swords erupted with more and more power. They crushed through space, causing the space around Jianqin to sink into eternal darkness. The space there had already shattered and collapsed, unable to fuse together for a very long time. Jianqin clenched his teeth as the veins on his forehead bulged. His entire body trembled violently. He had fused the two swords before, but that time he had only fused 2 strands of sword qi. The price was that his saint weapon, the light wind sword, had shattered, and he had suffered extremely heavy injuries. Due to his previous experience, Jianqin believed that the fusion of the 2 swords would be extremely easy. It should be no different from the first fusion. However, when he fused the 2 swords a second time, he suddenly discovered that fusing them to the level of immortal artifacts was not a simple matter. This was because the closer the 2 swords were to each other, the greater the resistance would become. It basically increased several times in the end, making it extremely difficult for Jianqin to fuse the 2 swords. This was because the current azulate swords were no longer the sword spirits of the past. Even though that was the case, Jianqin continued to grit his teeth and endure. Determination filled his eyes. He had to fuse the 2 swords and kill Ouyang Yangwen. The Ziying sword and Qing Suo sword both resonated clearly as if they were howling in pain. As the 2 swords drew closer and closer, tiny cracks appeared on the swords. They spread in all directions, causing more and more cracks to appear. The fusion of the 2 swords was just too powerful. Even though the sword spirits had not completely recovered, the power from the fusion was still not something that mere immortal tier swords could endure. Ouyang Yangwen no longer remained as composed as before. He stared at Jianqin with an ugly expression. He could clearly sense that death was rapidly approaching him. This feeling made him shiver. However, when he wanted to stop Jianqin, he discovered in shock that he was unable to approach Jianqin anymore. The pressure around Jianqin was just too powerful. It destroyed the surrounding space and prevented him from approaching. Run! At this moment, A thought that even he did not dare to imagine appeared in Ouyang Yangwen's head, and that was to flee. At that moment, he no longer cared about his dignity and dignity. The terrifying pulses had already filled him with fear. Now that his life was in danger, he abandoned his dignity without any hesitation. He no longer cared about how embarrassing it would be. He immediately turned around and fled. The other Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints no longer dared to stay any longer when they saw the Grand Elder flee in panic. They stared at the terrifying pulses in the sky in fear, and all abandoned their opponents, flying toward the tunnel as quickly as they could. However, just as they approached the spatial passageway and were about to step in without hesitation, the terrifying pressure in the sky suddenly disappeared in an instant. The purple and green light that covered the sky also disappeared in an instant, and the world returned to normal once again. Jianchen was sheet white in outer space. He vomited a mouthful of blood, which turned into a bloody mist. His fusion of the two swords had failed. The sudden change caused all the Origin Realm experts who were about to enter the tunnel to come to a halt. They all looked at the sky in doubt. When they saw Jianchen's current state, they became stunned. Ouyang Yangwen was stunned as well, but he returned to his senses soon after. His face immediately paled. Chapter 1550. Whether it was Ouyang Yangwen or the other Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints, they were all old monsters who had lived for several tens of thousands of years. They were extremely experienced and knowledgeable. As soon as they saw Jianchen's situation, they knew that Jianchen had failed to use the devastating attack, perhaps due to his lack of strength. The Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints all let out a sigh of relief. After all, the pressure from before was just far too powerful. It made them feel like the end of the world had arrived, making them all shiver inside. They all felt very fortunate that Jianchen was not powerful enough to use the ability that they all feared. Otherwise, they did not even know if they could return to the world of Forsaken Saints safely. Ouyang Yangwen had become furious. He was a person who cared about his reputation greatly, yet he had been humiliated time and time again ever since he had come here. The first time, he had been trapped by Jianchen's treasure that belonged to their world of Forsaken Saints, preventing him from moving at all. In the end, he had to be taken to the world of Forsaken Saints by Xiongzhong, and the Spirit King personally removed the azure disc. Yet now he had actually fled in fright from Jianchen's use of an ability that exceeded his abilities. He had almost fled back to the world of Forsaken Saints. Originally, he only needed to calm down and think about it to realize that it was impossible for Jianchen to use such a powerful ability with his current strength and injuries. This was because Ouyang Yangwen could tell that Jianchen had not reached the Origin Realm yet. He was still at the level of the Holy Emperor. The reason why he possessed the battle prowess of late returnants was all because of his comprehension of the way of the sword and his two powerful swords. Coupled with his tough body and unbelievable recovery abilities, he was able to put up a fight against late returnants experts. The more powerful the ability, the greater the requirement on the user's strength. In Ouyang Yangwen's opinion, even if Jianchen could use an extremely high-level ability with his strength, the ability would not be able to threaten him, let alone make him feel like he was facing death. Ouyang Yangwen could not help but feel his face heat up after thinking this through. This was just too embarrassing. He was tempted to find a hole to hide in. He was too ashamed to face the other elders and protectors. Although the elders and protectors had fled as well, Ouyang Yangwen was the Grand Elder. He was the greatest person below the Spirit King. In his eyes, how could the other elders be compared to him? At the same time, he could clearly tell that he had been the first to flee. Jianchen, I'm going to skin you alive. Ouyang Yangwen gritted his teeth as flames of fury burned in his eyes. Terrifying killing intent radiated from him, reaching the limit. He had fallen to Jianchen's hands twice, humiliating him both times. If Jianchen was an expert who surpassed him in strength, Ouyang Yangwen would not have become so furious. However, Jianchen was not even at the origin realm. Ouyang Yangwen's sword trembled and produced a clear, clanging sound. He furiously charged toward Jianchen. Jianchen was pale white in outer space. He was covered in blood. His flesh had split open, forming web-like cracks. Even though the fusion of the two swords had failed, both he and the Azulite swords had suffered an intense backlash. The Azulite swords were now covered in cracks. They had dimmed, having lost their former luster. Jianchen's chaotic body was heavily injured as well. His body had cracked, making him seem vicious and terrifying. Even his soul was heavily injured, causing his head to ache. He was haggard and extremely weak. Jianchen had truly been injured right now. Even with his chaotic body, he struggled to withstand the attacks. His battle prowess had plummeted. Let alone returnance experts, even receival experts would struggle to fend them off. However, at this moment, the space above Mercenary City suddenly collapsed. It shattered like a mirror, turning into a world of darkness. An extremely powerful pulse of energy expanded from the darkness, spreading across the entire sky in a mighty manner. A huge, black shadow slowly appeared in the shattered space. It hovered above everyone's heads, blotting out the sun and causing the entire world to dim. This was a very huge divine palace, like an imperial palace. It was dazzling in gold and jade, with bejeweled palaces and white jade stairs. It was gorgeous and dignified. It rushed out from the shattered space, emitting a vast and majestic pressure that pervaded the heaven and earth. As soon as the divine hall completely appeared in the air, it shone with a dazzling azure light, enveloping the entire divine hall. As it flickered in and out of existence, it made the divine hall seem even more mysterious. It also seemed to give off a hint of immortality. Countless rare beasts appeared in the azure light. They emitted the cries of beasts as they danced around the divine hall. There were divine dragons, phoenixes, birds of prey, and beasts of all kinds. There were several hundred species, many of which did not exist on the Tianyuan continent. Even the elders and protectors from the world of forsaken saints did not recognize more than half of them. The divine hall seemed even more majestic under the accompaniment of these rare beasts. It seemed like it had transcended the world and stood above the 9 heavens. However, at this moment, a huge formation appeared within the divine hall. As the formation revolved, it immediately erupted with azure light. Countless azure ribbons swept through the sky, rapidly extending toward all the people from the world of forsaken saints. They tied up all the Holy Emperor, and some of the ribbons shot toward the origin realm experts. The azure ribbons moved just too quickly, almost as fast as light. Although the origin realm experts could see the ribbons approaching them, they were unable to react at all due to how fast they were. In the end, even Ouyang Yangwen failed to break free. He was tied up by several azure ribbons. The entire world fell into a strange silence at that moment. It became deathly silent in a single moment. Everyone stared at the huge divine hall in a daze. What kind of divine hall was this? It possessed such power that it could tie up all the people from the world of forsaken saints in a single instance. Ouyang Yangwen's eyes narrowed. He looked at the divine hall surrounded by 100 beasts and enveloped by a layer of azure light. Shock filled his eyes as he thought, how can there be such a powerful divine hall in this world? To think that its attacks can reach the speed of light. Who can dodge that? Ouyang Yangwen soon sensed the power of the azure ribbons around him. A sliver of surprise immediately appeared in his eyes, and with a gentle jolt, the ribbons around him immediately snapped. Ouyang Yangwen stared at the gradually disappearing azure light with a strange expression. He could not help but laugh aloud, so that's how it is. It only has unparalleled speed, but it's just too weak. It can only keep the Holy Emperor trapped. The other Origin Realm experts were stunned when they heard that. They all used their Origin energy to gently jolt the ribbons as well. Just as expected, although the ribbons around them possessed unbelievable speed, they were just too weak. It was useless against Origin Realm experts. Everyone, come over immediately. Pour your energy into the Divine Hall. I can't unleash the Divine Hall's true power by myself. A vigorous voice rang out from the huge Divine Hall. It was very stern. It's Tianjin. It's Tianjin's voice. T, is this the supreme Divine Hall of Mercenary City? Just how powerful is this Divine Hall? Even with Tianjin's strength, the Holy Emperor still can't unleash the Divine Hall's full power. Everyone on the side of the Tianyuan continent gathered their attention when they heard the voice. Immediately, cries rang out, and some people immediately charged toward the Divine Hall without regard for their injuries. Now that someone had arrived, the others no longer hesitated. Regardless of whether they were injured or not, regardless of how severe their injuries were, they all charged toward the Divine Hall as quickly as they could. They wanted to pour their last bit of energy into the Divine Hall so that it could unleash even more power. Although there were several Receival experts and many Returnance experts from the world of Forsaken Saints present, all of them held great confidence in the Divine Hall after witnessing its extraordinary appearance. This was because the Divine Hall was supported by hundreds of beasts. Countless Divine Halls had appeared throughout history, but none of them had ever appeared in such a manner. At the same time, over half of the beasts did not belong to the Tianyuan continent. They clearly did not belong to this world. This was because the Divine Hall had been left behind by Mo Tianyin in the past. Although many people believed that Mo Tianyin was at the Origin Realm, that was only a guess. No one on the Tianyuan continent knew just how powerful Mo Tianyin was. After all, there had only been 4 such experts in ancient times. Mo Tianyin had only clashed with the war god, Aruejin, at the same level of cultivation. Mo Tianyin had won that battle. He had repelled the war god. Chapter 1551. All the human experts on the Tianyuan continent, regardless of whether they were the Holy Emperor, or the Saint Rulers, shot into the sky. They flew toward the Divine Hall in the sky. All of them understood that the strength of the world of Forsaken Saints was not something the Tianyuan continent could stop. They were already at the end of their rope. So the appearance of the Divine Hall in Mercenary City immediately gave them all hope. Now, the Divine Hall had become the only thing they could rely on. At the same time, the remaining experts of the magical beasts, 100 races, and sea race did not fall behind. They all flew into the sky at the same time, flying toward the Divine Hall as quickly as they could. All of them secretly accumulated energy along the way. As soon as they approached the Divine Hall, they would pour all their energy into it without any hesitation so that they could unleash the Divine Hall's greatest power. Tianjin had yelled out in the language of the Tianyuan continent. The experts of the magical beasts, sea race, and 100 races had already stayed on the Tianyuan continent for many days before the battle, so they had already grasped the language. However, the people from the world of Forsaken Saints did not understand the language of the Tianyuan continent. They had communicated with the Tianyuan continent through the senses of their souls, so they could bypass the language barrier between the two worlds. As a result, no one from the world of Forsaken Saints could understand what Tianjin had just said. When the Origin Realm experts discovered that all the people from the 4 races were flying toward the Divine Hall in the sky at the same time, they thought that they wanted to take refuge in the Divine Hall to avoid the crisis. They all sneered as disdain filled their eyes. Although the Divine Hall had made a great appearance, they had already witnessed its power. Even though it was extraordinary, it was only enough to pose a threat to the Holy Emperor. It was nothing before the Origin Realm experts, and they could destroy it with a wave of their hand. As a result, they did not stop the people from approaching the Divine Hall. Instead, they hovered in the air as they mocked them. In just a few seconds, all the people from the 4 races had disappeared into the azure light from the Divine Hall. Afterward, under Tianjin's orders, all of them arrived before the Divine Hall and pressed their hands against it. They poured all the energy within them into the Divine Hall without holding back at all. Immediately, the supreme Divine Hall shone with azure light. Its might was overwhelming, filling the entire sky. The strange beasts condensed from the azure light became even more corporeal at that moment. They were lifelike, as if they were alive. They let out the cries of hundreds of beasts as they revolved around the divine hall. The divine hall's power immediately skyrocketed with the energy from these people. Another stream of azure light condensed from the divine hall and shot toward the origin realm experts with unbelievable speed. The azure streams moved at the speed of light. They were so fast that even Ouyang Yongwen, who was at late returnance, was unable to dodge them. The streams of light closed in on him in a single moment and wrapped around him like a dumpling. This time, the divine hall was so powerful that it erupted with the combined power of all the experts from the Tian-Yuan continent. It was far more powerful than when Tianjin controlled it alone. As a result, the azure streams of light were much more powerful than before. The receival experts from the world of Forsaken Saints were unable to shatter the streams of light as easily as before. Only the elders who had reached returnance managed to shatter the azure ribbons of light, like before. Although the azure ribbons were still unable to restrain them, they could clearly sense that the ribbons had become much more powerful this time. The expressions of the receival experts who were still trapped all changed when they saw how flexible the streams of light were. The sainthood experts of this world had actually strengthened the divine hall to such a level that it could even trap receival experts. This was definitely not a good sign for them. Suddenly, the receival experts all bellowed out. Origin energy surged out from their bodies as they used everything they had to break free from the restraints of the streams of light. However, even with that being the case, they were unable to shatter the streams of light. All they could do was use their powerful origin energy to push the streams apart by an inch. They were unable to shatter the streams of light. When the ribbons were torn apart, a receival expert even controlled his sword to stand on the ribbons with his mind. The azure ribbons immediately shook violently, but they stabilized very soon. The attack failed to cut through the ribbons. A cold light immediately flashed through Ouyang Yongwen's eyes when he saw this. He glared at the divine hall that loomed in the air and gloomily said, "With the addition of a group of sainthood experts, the formations of the divine hall have become much more powerful, allowing it to deal with receival experts. However, it's still not enough to deal with returnance experts. Watch how I destroy this divine hall." Ouyang Yongwen wielded his sword in his right hand and fused with it. He shone with resplendent light as he tore through the azure light. He charged into the azure light with an unstoppable force and struck the divine hall. Boom! A deafening boom immediately erupted when the two collided. Terrifying ripples of energy ripped through the surroundings, causing large swathes of space to collapse. Ouyang Yongwen's face suddenly changed the moment his sword struck the divine hall. Disbelief filled his eyes. He felt like the divine hall before him was an extremely tough fortress. Not only did his attack fail to shatter the divine hall as he had imagined, but it did not even leave behind a single mark. The divine hall did not even shake. He was unable to move the divine hall at all with his strength at late returnance. Afterwards, a powerful force appeared, causing Ouyang Yongwen's entire right arm to become numb. He was blown away as well. The Supreme Divine Palace was enveloped by a thick layer of green light. It was faintly discernible, standing in its original place without any damage. It gave off a tremendous pressure. Ouyang Yongwen became stunned by this sight. He stared at the divine hall in shock as his heart churned. Just what kind of divine hall was it? It was so tough that he was unable to damage it at all with his strength. He, Ouyang Yongwen, had lived for several tens of thousands of years. Apart from the sacred spirit hall, there was no other divine hall that could compare to the divine hall before him. The other elders and protectors in the world of Forsaken Saints were stunned as well. Disbelief filled their faces. With Elder Ouyang's strength, he was unable to damage the divine hall at all. Just how powerful was the divine hall? Chapter 1552. This divine hall should be their final trump card. It's extremely tough, such that I can't damage it at all, but they won't be able to maintain it for long with their strength. If we constantly attack the Divine Hall and waste away their energy, they'll be able to maintain it for even less time. Once they lose the protection of the Divine Hall, I'd like to see what other trump cards they have," Ouyang Yongwen said with a sneer. He glanced past the remaining returnance experts and said, "Elders, let's attack the Divine Hall together. Today, we might be able to obtain a Divine Hall that's as powerful as our Sacred Spirit Hall." Ouyang Yongwen's voice became filled with excitement towards the end. The Divine Hall before them was so powerful that it tempted all of them. They all turned their attention to the Divine Hall, even forgetting about the Origin Realm experts from the Tian Yuan continent. In the eyes of the elders and protectors from the world of Forsaken Saints, although the Tian Yuan continent possessed a few astonishing experts, they posed no threat to the world of Forsaken Saints. Elder Ouyang could deal with them all by himself. Not to mention, there was the even more terrifying Spirit King aside from Elder Ouyang. If they could obtain such a powerful Divine Hall and bring it back to the world of Forsaken Saints, it would still be a great merit, even if they could not possess it. The merit would be countless times greater than conquering this world. The other returnants elders from the world of Forsaken Saints obviously had no objections to Ouyang Yongwen's orders. They all used their full strength, striking the Divine Hall with their most powerful attacks. Immediately, booms rang out in the sky. Terrifying ripples of energy formed powerful storms that wreaked havoc in the surroundings, causing wild gales to kick up. Sand and pebbles were kicked into the air, causing the entire sky to darken. The Tian Yuan continent, which had already been shattered, collapsed in large swaths from the powerful ripples of energy. The ground sank, revealing a pitch-black, bottomless abyss. It truly seemed like the end of the world. The world was being destroyed. Ouyang Yongwen, on the other hand, shot out several dozen strands of sword chi to cut through the azure light that was still wrapped around the receival experts, helping them break free. After regaining their freedom, the receival experts did not hesitate at all. They all joined in the attack on the Divine Hall. "Big brother, are you all right? You've lost a lot of blood. Big brother, let's run to Master's Shrine." Xiao Ling sobbed as she stared at the bloody Jianqin with tears in her eyes. Afterwards, she waved her hand and enveloped Jianqin with Origin energy. She flew down to the Supreme Divine Hall with Jianqin as quickly as she could. Xiao Ling was the only Origin Realm expert on the side of the Tian Yuan continent who was uninjured. Neither of them could do anything to the other in their battle. At the same time, Changyang Mingyue raised her head and glanced at the Divine Hall that was surrounded by 100 beasts. After a moment of hesitation, she turned into a blur and entered the Divine Hall with lightning-like speed. Ta also flew up from the depths of the ground. He gave off a layer of golden light, but the current golden light was extremely dim compared to before. His face was pale, and his expression was haggard. He flew towards the Divine Hall with a weak expression. Xiao Jin flew up from below as well. He had just been cut in half by Ouyang Yongwen's strike, but he had already recovered. His original form was the origin energy of the metallic spirit. His body had been condensed from a ball of golden liquid, so recovering his body was nothing difficult for him. Amagami hovered above Houston as he dragged his heavily injured body toward the Supreme Divine Hall. The Origin Realm experts on the Tian Yuan continent's side all flew toward the Supreme Divine Hall. Ouyang Yongwen frowned when he saw this. He called out, "This Divine Hall is already so powerful with the support of a group of sainthood experts. If a few Origin Realm experts join in, who knows how much more powerful it will become. Stop them quickly. Stop them. Don't let them enter the Divine Hall." The returnants elders from the world of Forsaken Saints immediately took action to stop Jianqin and the others from entering the Divine Hall. At the same time, another stream of azure light swept toward them at an unbelievable speed. At the same time, the streams of light around the Holy Emperor were withdrawn in a single instance. They gathered power and condensed into an even more powerful stream of light, which shot toward Jianqin Yongwen. The returnant's elders from the world of forsaken saints were completely helpless against the azure streams of light. Although the streams of light were unable to threaten them, they moved just too quickly. They were so fast that they were unable to react, making it impossible for them to dodge. Every time the streams of light swept toward them, they would be tightly bound. At the same time, Changyang Mingyue had entered the Divine Hall first. The Divine Hall had obtained the assistance of an early returnant's expert, so the azure streams of light became even more powerful. This time, the trapped elders had to expend quite a lot of effort to break free from the restraints of the azure streams of light. Ouyang Yongwen, on the other hand, failed to break free immediately because the azure ribbon that bound him was the most powerful. Jianqin, Xiaoling, Taita, Xiaojin, and Houston all entered the Divine Hall, disappearing from the sights of the Origin Realm experts from the world of forsaken saints. Ouyang Yongwen's face was terrifyingly sunken. He stared at the vague Divine Hall and gritted his teeth. Even with the support of a few Origin Realm experts, they're all heavily injured. They won't be able to recover in a few months or even years. I'd like to see if the Divine Hall can last for a few months. Not only do I want to flatten this world, but I want to take away the Divine Hall as well. Ouyang Yongwen and the other Origin Realm experts all attacked the Divine Hall as hard as they could. At the same time, they ordered the Holy Emperors below. All Holy Emperors scatter and kill all the cultivators in this world. Remember, no one can kill more than 1 million people, just in case you draw the celestial decay. Immediately, a bloodthirsty light appeared in the eyes of the Holy Emperor from the world of forsaken saints. They immediately scattered, spreading out in all directions. Tianjian's face immediately changed drastically in the Supreme Divine Hall. Without any hesitation, he immediately controlled the power of the Divine Hall to emit azure light, which turned into ribbons that caught up to the scattered Saint Emperors in a single instance. They bound up all the Saint Emperors from the foreign world, preventing them from committing a boundless slaughter in this world. Ouyang Yongwen could not help but laugh aloud when he saw this. All of this was within his expectations. He really did not care about the lives of the weaker cultivators from the Tianyuan continent. His true objective was to increase the consumption of the Divine Hall's power. Chapter 1553. Tianjian sat on a white jade pedestal in a majestic hall as he controlled the Divine Hall. Jianqin, Xiaoling, Xiaojin, Houston, Taita, Changyang Mingyue, Shangguanmu and so on all gathered around him. They poured their energy into the pedestal, allowing the Divine Hall to erupt with even greater power to fend off the Origin Realm experts from the world of forsaken saints. With the support of the Origin Realm experts, the Divine Hall immediately became much more powerful. The azure streams of light firmly wrapped around the receival experts from the world of forsaken saints, preventing them from breaking free. The returnant's experts were trapped as well. For a moment, the two sides entered a stalemate. However, what made them feel helpless was that the Divine Hall was a defensive Divine Hall. Although it possessed offensive formations, they were pitifully weak when compared to its defensive power. It was nowhere near enough to kill Origin Realm experts. This Divine Hall consumes far too much energy, and there's no Origin energy in this world. Once we run out of Origin energy, it'll be extremely difficult to recover if we just absorb the energy of the world. If this continues, it'll be extremely disadvantageous to us. We probably won't be able to last much longer, Changyang Mingyue said sternly. Even with a large group of sainthood experts and a few Origin Realm experts supporting the Divine Hall, they would not be able to stop Ouyang Yongwen's group for too long. After all, the Divine Hall's offensive power was so weak that it was negligible. Just defending passively was not an option. Moreover, whether it was using the azure streams to trap Ouyang Yongwen's group or using the toughness of the Divine Hall to endure their attacks, it would consume the Divine Hall's energy. Once the Divine Hall ran out of energy and they became exhausted, the Divine Hall's formations would lose their effectiveness. At that time, Ouyang Yongwen's group would still not be able to destroy the Divine Hall, but they would possess the strength to take it away. A Divine Hall that had run out of energy and formations would only have its toughness and weight left. Perhaps the Holy Emperor would be helpless against this weight, but it might not be enough to stop Origin Realm experts. Everyone frowned when they heard Changyang Mingyue's words. Their complexions became very ugly. Jianqin sank into his thoughts for a while before a cold light flashed through his eyes. He said with a deep voice, "We can't let this continue. You guys maintain the Divine Hall. I'll go heal immediately. I'll leave the Saint artifact here. You all take turns entering the artifact space, so the artifact spirit can heal you." Jianqin left behind the Saint artifact and left by himself. He found a quiet place to heal. Although the fusion of the twins' swords had failed, Jianqin still suffered a huge backlash. Not only had he suffered unimaginable injuries, his body had almost collapsed, but his soul had also suffered heavy injuries. In a secret room within the Divine Hall, Jianqin used another droplet of precious sap from the amethyst spiritual bamboo. He pressed it against his forehead, and as soon as it came in contact with his forehead, it silently seeped in. It turned into a refreshing presence that nourished Jianqin's soul, allowing it to recover rapidly. At the same time, Jianqin used the origin energy of a Class 9 Radiant Saint Master as well as his chaotic body to heal as quickly as he could. As Jianqin healed, the Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints were all trapped by the azure streams of light. Even Ouyang Yongwen was not able to avoid it. However, even though he was restrained, he did not seem nervous at all. Instead, he sneered and said, "I'd like to see just how long you can last. There's no origin energy in this world, so once you run out of energy, it'll be extremely difficult to recover." "Elder Ouyang, are we just going to waste time with them like this?" a protector at Receival asked. Ouyang Yongwen glanced at him and sneered, "Do you have any other ideas aside from wasting time with them like this? If the Divine Hall doesn't run out of energy, we won't be able to do anything to them. Even if I break free from these restraints with my full strength, I won't be able to do anything to the Divine Hall." In the blink of an eye, the stalemate lasted for an entire day. During that day, the Origin Realm experts trapped by the azure streams of light might not have used up a lot of origin energy, but in order to prevent the shockwaves from attacking the Divine Hall from destroying the Tianyuan continent, the Divine Hall could only conjure up azure streams of light to restrain them. As a result, the consumption was extremely great. Many of the sainthood experts had even used up all their saint force and were currently sitting down to recover. However, the rate at which they recovered saint force could not compare to the rate at which it was used up. As time went on, all the sainthood experts would use up all their saint force. Without their help, the power of the Divine Hall would weaken. The longer the situation dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for the Tianyuan continent. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly charged out of the Divine Hall. He was enveloped by a layer of powerful light, radiating with an extremely sharp sword chi. The azulate swords hovered above his head, shining with an azure and violet light. Compared to before, the light was much dimmer. At the same time, the swords were covered in cracks. As soon as Jianqin appeared, he charged toward the returnant's expert closest to him with lightning speed. His killing intent surged as his presence surged, causing the clouds in the surroundings to churn. The returnant's expert was Elder Zhang, who had fought against Houston earlier. Elder Zhang's face immediately changed when he saw Jianqin charge toward him. Without any hesitation, he erupted with his full strength, immediately pushing the azure streams 3 meters away. At the same time, a 4-meter-long sword appeared in his hand. He stabbed out with it. Elder Zhang knew Jianqin's strength, so he used his full strength right from the start. He did not hold back at all. Jianqin had already recovered from his wounds. He had returned to his peak condition. Although the azulate swords had been damaged, he could still defeat mid-returnant's experts when he used his full strength. However, Elder Zhang was only at early returnance, so as soon as they clashed, Jianqin knocked Elder Zhang's sword away with the Ziying sword. At the same time, the Qing Suo sword was controlled by Jianqin. It turned into a streak of azure light and chopped off Elder Zhang's right arm. Elder Zhang grunted. Just when he wanted to retreat, the azure streams of light had lost the support of his origin energy when he used his full strength against Jianqin. They immediately retreated and wrapped around Elder Zhang's body. Oh no! Elder Zhang's heart immediately sank. However, just as this thought appeared in his mind, a green light flashed in his eyes. Elder Zhang did not hesitate at all. He immediately abandoned his physical body and escaped with his origin spirit. With a panicked expression, he fled toward the spatial tunnel. Spurt! The Ziying sword pierced Elder Zhang's head. Jianqin slapped the hilt of the sword, and Elder Zhang's head immediately exploded. The Ziying sword turned into a violet streak of light and chased after Elder Zhang's fleeing soul with lightning speed. Elder Zhang's soul was nowhere near as fast as the Ziying sword. Seeing that he could not escape, he immediately cried out for help. Elder Ouyang, save. However, before he could even finish his words, the Ziying sword caught up and destroyed his soul. Chapter 1554. The other Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints all witnessed how Jianqin had killed Elder Zhang with lightning speed. They were all greatly shaken, causing the expressions of the other elders to drastically change. The hearts of the Receival experts churned. They could not remain calm at all. Some of them had even begun to fear Jianqin. As a returnance expert, Elder Zhang had actually been slain by Jianqin in just 3 moves. Although Elder Zhang had been suppressed, which was why he could not withstand a single attack, it was still enough to demonstrate just how powerful Jianqin's battle prowess was. Jianqin had only needed 3 moves to kill Elder Zhang, who had the strength to temporarily break free. If Jianqin had targeted the Receival experts, they would have only been able to watch helplessly as they died. Even if they managed to escape with their souls, they would not have been able to escape death. Elder Zhang's fate was the best proof of that. More and more of the Receival protectors from the world of Forsaken Saints began to feel fear when they realized this. This was because they were unable to temporarily break free from the azure streams of light like returnance experts could. Jianqin had already charged toward a second returnance expert. His target was still the elder. Jianqin directly ignored the Receival experts. In Jianqin's eyes, whether it was Shaoling, Taita, Changyang Mingyue, or Houston, killing Receival experts would not be difficult at all. Only returnance experts could pose a serious threat to them. He needed to kill as many returnance experts as possible now that the returnance experts had been suppressed. Every returnance expert the world of Forsaken Saints lost would reduce the pressure the Tianyuan continent faced slightly. Jianqin's second target was Cheng Jingyan. Although Cheng Jingyan was a mid-returnance expert, she had been heavily injured by Changyang Mingyue when she clashed with her earlier. She had yet to recover from her injuries, so her strength was greatly affected. Killing her would be relatively easier. Cheng Jingyan's eyes suddenly narrowed as her expression drastically changed. She knew exactly how powerful Jianqin was. Even Xiongzhong, who was at late returnance, had been defeated. Even if she was in peak condition, she would not be the opponent of such an expert, let alone now that she was heavily injured and trapped by the azure ribbons. At this critical moment, Cheng Jingyan could no longer care about suppressing her injuries. Bearing the consequences of her worsening injuries, she erupted with all of her strength and underwent a sublimation, allowing her strength to temporarily return to its peak state and break free from the binding of the azure ribbons. But in doing so, she clearly paid a huge price. She spat out a few mouthfuls of blood, and her complexion became even paler. Even the injuries in her body were rapidly worsening. She simply couldn't hold on for long in such a state. Cheng Jingyan clenched her teeth as determination flickered through her eyes. In this moment of life and death, She was willing to give up on everything and face her opponent in her strongest state. She did not care even if she would be heavily injured. She just wanted to fight for a chance at survival. She swung the whip in her hand, and it immediately elongated. It shone with an azure light as it wrapped around Jianchen with lightning speed. Vaguely, the roar of a dragon seemed to ring out from the whip. A cold light flickered through Jianchen's eyes. He swung the Ziying sword at the whip with a resplendent glow. Immediately, the whip began to glow with azure light as sparks flew from the collision. The dragon's roar also rang through the sky at that moment. It was deafening as the might of a dragon permeated the surroundings. Moreover, the moment the Ziying sword came in contact with the whip, which had already grown to several thousand meters long, wrapped around the Ziying sword like an extremely nimble snake. Jianchen's eyes immediately narrowed. He could not help but study the whip. It was extremely extraordinary. When he swung his sword at the whip earlier, he felt like he had struck the body of a divine dragon. Sparks flew from the collision as if the whip was actually a divine dragon. Afterwards, Jianchen's arms suddenly trembled. The Ziying sword immediately shone brightly as sword qi surged into the sky. It broke free from the whip in an instant. Jianchen held the sword in his right hand as he gently tapped the whip with the tip of his foot. He shot towards Cheng Jingyan like an arrow. Cheng Jingyan's whip danced rapidly, expanding to several thousand meters long. It immediately spiraled in the air like a divine dragon. At the end of the whip, an azure dragon's head appeared, blocking Jianchen's approach. A 3-meter-wide shield, completely formed from the whip, appeared before Cheng Jingyan. Jianchen used the light from his sword to protect himself as he shot towards Cheng Jingyan as a streak of light. He dispersed the dragon's head with a single strike before moving through the air as fast as he could. He collided with Cheng Jingyan's shield with an unstoppable force. The Ziying sword shone brightly as it struck the center of the shield. With a great boom, the shield immediately collapsed, while Cheng Jingyan vomited blood. She was blown away as if she had been heavily injured. Heavy killing intent appeared in Jianchen's eyes. He immediately pursued, determined to kill Cheng Jingyan. He showed no mercy at all. Let's go save Cheng Jingyan. Jianchen may be very powerful, but killing him will only take a few moves if we work together, a returnant's elder called out. Immediately, several of them erupted with their full strength in an attempt to break free from the restraints of the azure ribbons. However, at this moment, the azure ribbons shone brightly. They erupted with an even greater power, trapping the returnant's experts. They were unable to break free and save Cheng Jingyan in a short amount of time. However, at this moment, a great boom rang out. Ouyang Yongwen erupted with a surging presence and swung his sword as hard as he could at the azure ribbons. Immediately, the ribbons shattered. The azure ribbons could restrain mid-returnant's experts and even prevent them from breaking free in a short amount of time if they used their full strength. However, it was rather difficult to keep Ouyang Yongwen trapped. After all, Ouyang Yongwen was just too powerful. His battle prowess was no weaker than those who had just reached reciprocity. He had been willing to be trapped by the azure ribbons earlier because he wanted to waste away the divine hall's power. Ouyang Yongwen did not hesitate after breaking free. He immediately charged toward Jianchen. A blood-red world appeared behind Ouyang Yongwen. A blood-red sun had already set on the western horizon, while a crescent moon slowly rose in the eastern sky. It hung high in the sky and shone with a demonic light. Chapter 1555. This time, Ouyang Yongwen directly used a secret technique. He wanted to kill Jianchen as quickly as possible. A single divine hall was enough to give them a headache. If Jianchen caused trouble outside and killed the Origin Realm experts trapped by the azure streams of light, the world of Forsaken Saints would suffer extremely great losses. The world of Forsaken Saints could not care less about the lives of the Holy Emperor, but they had to worry about the number of Origin Realm experts they had. Moreover, the azure streams of light moved just too quickly. Even Ouyang Yongwen was unable to dodge them. As long as they swept toward him, he would definitely become entangled. Although he could break free from the azure streams of light if he used his full strength, it would take an extremely large toll on his origin energy if the situation persisted for too long. In a world without origin energy, it would be extremely difficult for him to recover once he ran out of origin energy. This was also the reason why Ouyang Yongwen wanted to kill Jianqin in such a hurry. The blood-red sword qi shone with a dazzling red light as it shot toward Jianqin with the power of the blood-red sun. The sword qi was like a streak of light as it gave off a shocking presence, dyeing the entire region blood-red. Ouyang Yongwen was already stronger than Jianqin, coupled with the fact that he had used a secret technique to erupt with an even greater might. Jianqin dared not to be careless at all. Jianqin glanced at Cheng Jingyin with some regret. He was so close to killing a second returnant's elder from the world of Forsaken Saints, but he was forced to give up now. Suddenly, the twin swords seemed to recover their previous might. They erupted with intense azure and violet light as well as a dazzling white light. They radiated with surging sword intent. This was the power of laws that Jianqin had grasped at partial achievement of sword origin. Now, Jianqin could no longer worry about damaging the twin swords. He used his full strength. He formed a seal with his hands, and the twin swords shot toward the blood-red sword qi with lightning speed as they extended to 300 meters in length. A deafening boom immediately erupted when the two swords collided. The blood-red sword qi was extremely powerful. The azulate swords were blown far away, while the sword qi continued toward Jianqin with the power of the blood-red sun. It moved extremely quickly, arriving before Jianqin with a flash of red. However, the sword qi rapidly weakened after being obstructed by the twin swords. It was no longer as powerful as before. Jianqin's eyes narrowed. Although the sword qi had been drastically weakened, he could still sense that it was not to be underestimated. In that critical moment, he stepped off the ground and retreated rapidly. He appeared several thousand meters away in a single instance. At the same time, he formed a sword with his right hand and used his cultivation at partial achievement of sword origin. He condensed the power of the laws of the sword into his fingers, causing a snow-white streak of light to appear in his right hand. It shone with a dazzling light. His comprehension of the way of the sword was limited, so the power of the laws of the sword was not extremely powerful. It was even slightly weaker than the twin swords. However, the twin swords had been blown away and could not return to his hand in time, so they became the best method to block the remaining sword qi. Boom! With a great boom, the two sword qis collided. Immediately, it was like a brilliant firework had bloomed in the sky. Countless strands of sword qis shot out in all directions, like scattered petals from a celestial maiden. Jianqin's sword qi dispersed, but a finger-sized strand of sword qi remained. It passed through Jianqin's body with a demonic red light. Jianqin shuddered. The strand of sword qi contained a sliver of the power of the blood-red sun, causing it to become extremely hot. The wound on his chest rapidly began to melt, and in the blink of an eye, a fist-sized hole appeared. His organs were heavily damaged. Jianqin immediately suppressed the wound with chaotic force and used radiant saint force to heal. The second transformation of the blood sun and crescent moon, force of moonrise. Ouyang Yongwen called out and continued to use the secret technique. However, before he could use the second transformation, there was a flash of azure light, and he was bound by the azure ribbons of light once again. This time, the ribbons were even more powerful. They actually forced back the origin energy that permeated Ouyang Yongwen's body in a single instance. At the same time, there was a flash of golden light behind Ouyang Yongwen. Tai Ta silently appeared behind Ouyang Yongwen with his golden axe. A supreme battle intent condensed into an illusionary golden axe above his head, fusing with the axe in his hand. Immediately, he erupted with an even more powerful presence. The axe fused with the soul as it directly swung towards Ouyang Yongwen's head. Ouyang Yongwen's face suddenly changed. Tai Ta had appeared without any prior signs, so he had failed to sense him earlier. If he had not been restrained, he obviously would not have cared about Tai Ta's attack at all. However, he felt an intense sense of danger now. "Be careful, Elder Ouyang." The other elders from the world of Forsaken Saints discovered Ouyang Yongwen's situation as well. Their faces all changed as they cried out. Ouyang Yongwen's eyes exploded with light. He suddenly bellowed at the sky, and surging origin energy surged out of his body without holding back at all. It was enough to obliterate space and make the world tremble. Even though the azure ribbons did not shatter under his full strength, they were pushed a meter away. The golden axe was almost touching Ouyang Yongwen's head. At this critical juncture, Ouyang Yongwen only had time to raise the long sword in his hand to block above his head. The golden axe landed on Ouyang Yongwen's sword with great force. The terrifying force directly knocked Ouyang Yongwen out of the sky and toward the ground. Jianqin turned into a blur and shot over with lightning speed. He caught up to Ouyang Yongwen in a single instance and stabbed out with the Ziying sword. Ouyang Yongwen swung his sword and blocked the Ziying sword. At the same time, he forced Jianqin back. However, the Qing Suwa sword stabbed into Ouyang Yongwen's abdomen under Jianqin's control. It turned into a streak of azure light and left behind the power of laws in Ouyang Yongwen's body. Ouyang Yongwen paled and spat out a mouthful of blood. He lowered his head and looked at his abdomen. Disbelief filled his face as he murmured somewhat absent-mindedly, "I've actually been injured. Impossible, this is impossible. How could they have injured me?" Ouyang Yongwen struggled to accept this. He was the greatest elder of the world of Forsaken Saints and a late returnance expert, only second to the Spirit King. However, he had been injured by someone who had not even reached the origin realm. This dealt a huge blow to his confidence. "Tai Ta, go kill the origin realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints." "I'll keep him busy," Jianqin said to Tai Ta before aggressively charging toward Ouyang Yongwen. The azure streams of light were unable to trap Ouyang Yongwen at all. In order to prevent Ouyang Yongwen from interfering with Tai Ta's battle against the other origin realm experts, he could only keep Ouyang Yongwen busy so that he could not break free. Without any hesitation, Tai Ta immediately charged toward the origin realm experts. However, he knew that he was still slightly weaker than Jianqin. It would take some effort for him to kill returnance experts, but time was of the essence, so he did not deal with the elders. Instead, he charged toward the protectors. The protectors were unable to break free from the restraints at all. When they saw Tai Ta fly toward them, their expressions immediately changed. A few of them called for help from the elders. Immediately, two of the elders broke free from the restraints and worked together to deal with Tai Ta. With Tai Ta's strength, it would be rather difficult for him to deal with two returnance experts by himself, so he was firmly suppressed as soon as they began fighting. At this moment, Changyang Mingyue saw what was happening outside and immediately said, "Let me deal with them." Tianjian opened his eyes as he sat on the white jade seat and controlled the divine hall. He said, "None of us can leave, or we probably won't be able to keep them trapped." Changyang Mingyue paused when she heard that. After a moment of hesitation, she did not leave in the end. She stayed behind to provide the divine hall with power and keep the experts from the world of Forsaken Saints trapped. Tianjian glanced past the people in the surroundings and said, "I need everyone's full support to make the divine hall even more powerful and keep the returnance experts trapped so that Tai Ta has time to kill the receival experts. Every origin realm expert that the world of Forsaken Saints loses will reduce some of the pressure on the divine hall so that we can deal with the other origin realm experts." The origin realm experts in the divine hall did not hesitate at all. They immediately placed their hands on the white jade seat and poured their energy into it, allowing the divine hall to unleash even more power. The two returnance experts who had encircled Tai Ta were trapped again very soon. Without their interference, Tai Ta immediately charged toward the Origin Realm experts. "Elders, let's all work together to kill him," suggested a Returnance elder. "The restraints of the azure streams of light have become even stronger. We may be able to break free temporarily with our strength, but it'll consume far too much Origin energy. Even if we break free, we'll only be able to attack a few times before we'll be bound again. It'll be difficult to kill this person even if we attack a few times," another elder said with a heavy voice. Chung Jingyin coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood. She glanced around and weakly said, "Elders, I'm very heavily injured. I won't be of any help if I stay here. I'll be leaving first." With that, Chung Jingyin used a secret technique. She burned her essence blood in exchange for great power to break free. Afterward, she entered the tunnel without even looking back, fleeing back to the world of forsaken saints. Chung Jingyun's departure was not obstructed at all. However, as soon as she left, the azure ribbons around her immediately split into 6. They were all used on the 6 other elders, causing their expressions to change. At this moment, a miserable cry rang out. A receival expert had died to Taita's hands. His soul had been wiped out. However, the death of the receival expert caused the faces of all the Returnance experts to become extremely sunken. This was because they discovered that the azure ribbons around the receival expert had split into 6 again, firmly binding the 6 of them. Chapter 1556. Ouyang Yongwen's face became extremely sunken when he heard that. Although the remaining experts from the world of forsaken saints could still easily sweep through the entire world, the appearance of the Divine Hall had turned the situation around. They had actually fallen into such an awkward situation despite originally having the upper hand. The Holy Emperor and all the receival protectors had been trapped by the azure light from the Divine Hall. It was impossible for them to break free. The Returnance experts, including Ouyang Yongwen himself, were also entangled by the azure light. With the death of a receival protector and Chung Jingyun's departure, the restraints on the 5 of them became even more intense. Originally, Ouyang Yongwen wanted to exhaust the power of the Divine Hall. Once the Divine Hall ran out of energy, the people hiding in there would be trapped. They would not be able to escape even if they wanted to. At that time, not only would they be able to wipe out all the Origin Realm experts in the world in a single stroke, but the Divine Hall would also belong to them. However, Ouyang Yongwen had never thought that the situation would be the exact opposite. Not only did they fail to exhaust the power of the Divine Hall as they wished, but they had also been forced into a passive situation. Even the extremely confident Ouyang Yongwen felt a sliver of pressure. The azure light had strengthened, making it impossible for him to break through it. He could only use Origin energy to keep it open. Not only did he have to use a portion of his energy to stop the strengthening of the azure light, but he also had to suppress the wound on his abdomen and stop the power of laws from spreading through his body. Under these circumstances and facing Genshin's sharp attacks, Ouyang Yongwen barely managed to maintain the upper hand. He was no longer able to crush Genshin in an overwhelming manner like before, nor was he able to stop Taita. At this moment, another miserable cry rang out. The second receival protector from the world of forsaken saints had died to Taita's hands. His head had been cleaved in by Taita's axe, and his soul had been wiped out. As soon as the protector died, the 5 Returnance elders from the world of forsaken saints immediately felt the azure streams of light become slightly more powerful. All of their expressions changed drastically, and even Ouyang Yongwen struggled to remain calm. If all the receival protectors were slain by Taita, they would no longer be able to shoulder the burden of the Divine Hall. The azure streams of light would probably become so powerful that even Returnance elders would not be able to break free. At that time, only death would await them. Moreover, their world of forsaken saints would not be able to bear the loss if so many Origin Realm experts died here. Elder Ouyang, the situation is getting worse for us. Let's retreat first. He glanced at the tunnel below from time to time. Clearly, he had already made up his mind. If Ouyang Yongwen wanted to remain here, he would flee even if he had to risk offending Ouyang Yongwen. Ouyang Yongwen clearly understood the situation as well. A sliver of humiliation appeared in his eyes as he gritted his teeth. Everyone, retreat to the world of forsaken saints! The remaining elders did not hesitate at all. They immediately used their full strength to break free from the restraints of the azure streams of light. However, they did not enter the tunnel immediately after breaking free. Instead, they all arrived beside the receival experts who could not break free from the streams of light to save them. The azure streams of light that trapped the receival protectors were clearly much weaker. They were nothing before returnance experts. With the assistance of the returnance experts, all the receival protectors were freed in just a short while. At the same time, Ouyang Yongwen furiously bellowed out. He forced Genshin back with a full-powered strike of his sword. He quickly swung his sword and shot out a sword chi that cut through the azure streams of light that trapped the Holy Emperor. He took everyone back into the tunnel, returning to their world in horrible shape. The Supreme Divine Hall did not pursue them, allowing them to flee like that. If the Supreme Divine Hall continued to trap them, they could have lost half of their experts or even all of them. However, at the same time, all the Origin Realm experts supporting the Supreme Divine Hall would have used up all their Origin energy to achieve such a victory. Their Origin energy might not even be enough to wipe out all the Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints. Once they ran out of Origin energy in this world without Origin energy, they would not be able to recover for several decades or even centuries. Without their support, the power of the Divine Hall would be drastically reduced. Once the experts from the foreign world attacked again, they would not be able to fend them off at all. After the people from the world of Forsaken Saints retreated, the Supreme Divine Hall rapidly descended from the sky. It blocked the exit of the tunnel, blocking it. The intense battle between the two worlds finally came to an end. All the survivors of the 4 races on the Tianyuan continent let out a sigh of relief. The joy of victory appeared on many of their faces. In the Supreme Divine Hall, many sainthood experts poured all their saint force into the Divine Hall without holding back at all, so that the Divine Hall could unleash even greater power. Many of them directly collapsed to the ground as soon as the battle ended. They had used up all their energy, and some of them even used secret techniques to burn their essence, blood. They were haggard and extremely weak right now. Tianjin and the Origin Realm experts in the surroundings all let out a sigh of relief. Tianjin's face paled. He was not the only one. Even the Origin Realm experts in the surroundings paled slightly as well. The consumption of energy from the Divine Hall was just too great. Although they had only used it for a short while, all of them had used up around 50% of their Origin energy. If the Origin Realm experts from the world of Forsaken Saints had not retreated, they would not have been able to last much longer. I never thought that the world of Forsaken Saints would attack so quickly. Fortunately, I refined the Divine Hall left behind by City, Lord Emotianyan in time, or the consequences would have been unthinkable, said Tianjin. He felt extremely fortunate. If his Supreme Divine Hall had arrived a little later, the situation would have been completely different. I never thought that the Divine Hall would be so powerful. Even late returnance experts can't shake it. Emotianyan really is the greatest human expert, after all. His true strength probably surpassed returnance in the past. Shengguanmu, or studied the Divine Hall. She sighed in amazement.